Chapter 1318. It was so painful that she kept trembling. It was so painful that she wanted to scream, but when she opened her mouth, the bitter and hot medicine rushed into her mouth. Her mouth was burning with pain, and she couldn't say a word. The medicinal soup seeped into her body bit by bit, passing through her limbs and bones, through her pores, and through her veins. Wherever it went, it was scorching hot, and the convulsive pain was unbearable. Then, it gathered in her dantian. Ning Xuema had never experienced such intense pain. She wanted to faint from the pain and never wake up again. However, the medicine seemed to have endless oxygen, and it seemed to have the effect of refreshing her mind. So, she was very sober, and she endured this torture with a clear mind. She had thought of countless ways to die, but she had never thought that she would be thrown into a cauldron and boiled to death by her sweetheart. Exploded to death. She knew that she was unlucky because she was a jinx, but this degree of bad luck, wasn't it too melodramatic? How could he do this? How could he be so cold-blooded? In order to avenge Wu Mo, in order to avenge her previous life, he boiled her alive. The hatred in Ning Xuema's heart was overwhelming. She was full of grief, indignation, and despair. The pain was like maggots in the tarsal bone, and her hatred also rose. The little girl in her body finally woke up, and she screamed crazily. The little girl also suffered the pain that Ning Xuema suffered, and the effect on her was twice as much as on Ning Xuema. Suddenly, there were countless flames in the ultimate where she was hiding. There were golden talismans circulating in the flames, and the Sanskrit characters were shining in golden light. At first, it was a little flame, but then it developed into a prairie fire at lightning speed, approaching her. She quickly set up countless layers of enchantments. Separated by countless layers of enchantments, the little girl still felt a piercing pain. Her whole body was illuminated by the talismans, and she felt like she was going to melt directly. The flame with the golden talisman was getting closer and closer to her. The ruins of End was originally filled with demonic qi, but wherever the flame went, the demonic qi painfully pulled at its body in the fire and finally dissipated. The little loli was in so much pain that she wanted to roll on the ground, but she couldn't. She forced herself to stand there and frantically set up a barrier. However, the barrier collapsed layer by layer in the flames and slowly gathered around her. The closer the flames got, the more the little loli's pain increased. Her head was covered in cold sweat, and her heart was filled with despair. She did not expect that Shinjuli really wanted to kill Ning Xuema. It couldn't help but scream, "Momo, save me. So painful. It hurts." His voice was filled with pain and despair. Ning Xuema was in so much pain that it could barely speak. Save it? She couldn't even protect herself now. How could she save it? She was in so much pain in the scalding medicinal liquid, but she couldn't move at all. Her eyes were filled with floating medicinal herbs. It was so dark that she couldn't see the end of it. The little loli watched as the flames broke through her barrier layer by layer like a hot knife through butter. The pain gradually intensified. She suddenly staggered and knelt on the ground, spitting out a mouthful of fresh blood. Her eyes flashed with a touch of despair, and her voice was filled with hatred. "Momo, I'm sorry. He really wants to kill you. He even used such a cruel method. Even the demons wouldn't use such a method." Ning Xuema was in so much pain that her head felt like it was going to explode. However, the little loli's words were incomparably clear in her mind, carrying with them an overwhelming amount of hatred. Ning Xuema's resentment unceasingly churned and clamored. Provoked by those words, it instantly surged and fiercely pounced on Ning Xuema. Chapter 1319. She couldn't hold it in any longer and spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood was as black as ink. It melted in the water and disappeared. "Momo, become a demon. Give me your body. I'll bring you out." More than half of the devil aura in the ultimate had disappeared. The little loli was very weak, but she still insisted on shouting for Ning Xuema to become a demon. Become a demon? A sentence flashed in Ning Xuema's mind. It was what the little loli had said when she was bewitched by her. Momo, become a demon. If you become a demon, you will be emotionless and loveless. You will never be hurt again. You will kill those who hurt you. Emotionless and loveless? If she became a demon, she would never feel pain again? Ning Xuema's eyes turned red. There were patterns looming under her eyes. The psychokinesis in her body flowed crazily. A wisp of black air flowed through her limbs and bones. It hit the acupoints that were sealed. The acupoints began to loosen. Become a demon. If she could escape from this torture by becoming a demon, if she could smash this place and destroy it completely, she would rather become a demon. How do I become a demon? She finally extended an olive branch to the little loli. The little loli was overjoyed. She ignored the pain in her body and screamed, "You just have to say, 'I want to become a demon. I want to become a demon' 3 times in your mind." It had waited for this opportunity for too long. As long as she said it 3 times, her soul would completely merge with it. It would swallow her and replace her. It could really return to the 3 realms. With the help of this rare good vessel, it could create a bloody storm. Ning Xuema closed her eyes. Finally, she uttered those words word by word in her mind. Following the little loli's instructions, she repeated them 3 times. The little loli was so excited that her whole body was trembling. She even forgot to set up a wizardry barrier to block the burning golden-red flame. After a while, Ning Xuema was still floating in the big cauldron. The little loli was still in the ultimate, looking at the flame approaching inch by inch. Nothing had changed. Everything was still the same. Normally, as long as Ning Xuema said those words in her mind, the little loli would be able to break out of the ultimate that had been locking her up. She would directly enter Ning Xuema's consciousness and swallow her soul to replace her. But to his surprise, it was completely useless. It was as if a passageway had been forcibly closed. How could this be? Could it be that it needed to charge out of the ultimate by itself? But I never needed it before. Or was it because Ning Xuema had a special physique that it needed to do it on its own? But the little loli looked around at the flames that were flashing with talismans. She was a little scared. The flames were still outside the barrier it had set up, but it was already in so much pain that it wanted to stomp its feet. If it were to rush out, it would definitely have to pass through the flames. It was afraid that it would be completely refined before it could rush out of the sinkhole. It anxiously paced back and forth within the barrier, unable to make a decision for a moment. Ning Xuema was also a little puzzled. Had she become a demon? Why did she feel that there was no difference? Her acupuncture points were still sealed. Her body was still soaked in the boiling medicinal soup and suffering. Damn it. Even this demon could not be relied on at the crucial moment. The little loli naturally did not want to give up this rare opportunity. She struck out her palm from within the ultimate. Shun Julie stood stiffly beside the cauldron and looked at it motionlessly. After an unknown period of time, he turned around and looked at the burning sandalwood beside the table. His fingers tightened. Chapter 1320. Time passed bit by bit, and the sandalwood slowly burned. A few wisps of black gas suddenly rose from the cauldron, and the surface of the cauldron began to ripple. The ripples intensified, and the surface of the water continued to bubble. It became more and more urgent, as if it was boiling, as if something was about to rush up. Demonic qi. Shun Julie's face sank. He raised his hand, and a flame was emitted. With a boom, the 3 tastes true fire became more vigorous. A mournful scream came from inside, and the flame in the ultimate suddenly flourished. The little loli's enchantment broke several layers in an instant, and the golden talisman became even more dazzling. Her body was twisted beyond recognition, and she broke out in a cold sweat. Finally, she could not help but scream, "Shun Julie, you will die a horrible death." Shun Julie. The little loli's voice had materialized, and it came out from Ning Xuema's abdomen. The voice was sharp and dull, and it resounded in the hall. Shun Julie's expression became colder. A blue light was emitted, and it drilled into the medicinal soup. Ning Xuema was originally dizzy, but she suddenly felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave. It was so cold that she was almost frozen. The wisp of ice followed her blood vessels and flowed through her limbs and bones. Wherever it passed, her blood vessels were almost frozen, and it finally flowed into her dantian. The red color that had just gathered in her eyes dissipated in an instant, and it turned into jet-black pupils. There was a clear pain in her eyes. What did he want to do? Was he going to kill her with the combination of cold and heat? The little loli in her dantian felt that her feet were slowly freezing. The fire was clearly in front of her, but she was so cold that she trembled. Her feet were already frozen, and she could not move. She could only watch as the enchantments broke one after another. The flame reflected on her pale face, and it clearly reflected her frightened expression. She shouted in Ning Xuema's mind, "Momo. Momo, beg him. Hurry up and beg him. If you don't beg, we will really die." Ning Xuema's face was as white as snow. She gritted her teeth, closed her eyes, and said resolutely, "Never. Even if I die, I won't beg him for anything." Ning Xuema didn't say anything, so the little loli began to shout. Her voice was very similar to Ning Xuema's voice. She kept screaming, "Master, I'm in pain. Master, I beg you to let me go." Shun Juli's body swayed as he looked at the boiling cauldron. Stealing his heart, he shot out another flame. Ning Xuema let out a mournful scream. She suddenly began to cry, "Master, how could you do this to me, Master?" Her voice was very similar to Ning Xuema's original voice. Shun Juli's body swayed slightly. He tried his best to stabilize his mind and set up an enchantment above the cauldron, blocking the sound coming from inside. His body was trembling slightly. He turned around and looked at the burning sandalwood beside the table. His heart tightened. There was still half left. The medicinal decoction in the medicinal cauldron kept churning, but there was no longer any black qi. But gradually, the medicinal decoction began to calm down. In the medicinal cauldron, Ning Xuema's psychokinesis circulated wildly. Finally, she broke through Shun Juli's acupoints. The red light in her eyes was faintly discernible. She jumped up fiercely, trying to escape from this nightmarish cauldron. She hit the enchantment hard and was bounced back into the cauldron. The boiling medicinal decoction drowned her again. When Shun Juli saw the figure, his heart skipped a beat. The blood in his chest churned violently, but he managed to suppress it. "Xuema, hold on. You must hold on." Chapter 13:21. Ning Xuema kept jumping out, but she was bounced back into the medicinal decoction by the barrier. The barrier only shook slightly under her force, but it was still as solid as before. Finally, she fell heavily into the medicinal decoction, causing a splash, and then there was no more movement. Inside the cauldron, the boiling medicinal decoction actually calmed down. For a long time, there wasn't a single ripple. She fainted. Once she fainted, the psychokinesis in her body was very likely to go berserk, causing her whole body to explode. Shun Juli clenched his hands tightly. Looking at the medicinal cauldron that was no longer rippling, his face became even paler. "Shui Yimo, wake up for me." There was still no movement inside the cauldron. Shun Juli's face was pale. His hand touched the cauldron as if he was spasming, and he didn't feel anything even though he was scalded. "Shui Yimo, wake up. If you persist, this seat won't hold a grudge against you for trying to assassinate this seat, and you can even be this seat's disciple." The inside of the cauldron was as calm as a pool of stagnant water. Even though the three true fire burned fiercely, it couldn't make the medicinal decoction inside the cauldron bubble again. Shun Juli's figure swayed, and his indifferent expression finally cracked. With a trace of panic, he said in a trembling voice, "Ning Xuema, if you persist, this seat will marry you." "Haven't you always wanted to marry me?" Ning Xuema already didn't know how many times she had fainted from the pain and then woken up. Shun Juli's words were still clear even though they were separated by layers of jade-green waves. He said, "Xuema, I will marry you." Ning Xuema only wanted to laugh crazily. She had waited for him to say these words for as long as 10 years. Day and night, she had hoped for him to say these words personally and then become his bride, to accompany him hand in hand to the ends of the earth. Unexpectedly, she had finally waited for this vow, but it was in a situation where he was going to burn her to death, when he was going to personally throw her into the cauldron to refine her. The inside of the cauldron finally began to ripple again. Ning Xuema's unreasonably hoarse voice came. I don't care. Shinjuli, let me tell you, I don't care. I'd rather not know you in my life. She almost screamed these words out. Shinjuli's face turned pale. His mind became unstable, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Shinjuli's heart felt like it was being squeezed by someone. Even breathing became difficult. Shinjuli's face was as pale as snow. Pain flashed through his eyes. She actually didn't care? Hadn't she always wanted to marry him? She actually wanted to never know him. Not allowed. He, Shinjuli, had fallen into the hands of the same person in both of his lifetimes. Therefore, he must hold this person in his hands. However, the ancient devil in her body had to be eliminated. As long as it remained in her body, it was in danger of completely devouring her soul. Therefore, Ning Xuema absolutely could not become a demon. This demon-vanquishing soup was something he had painstakingly prepared over the past few days. It was all to get rid of the demonic qi in her body, to get rid of that demon. He knew that she was afraid of water, afraid of drowning, so he specially sent a steady stream of oxygen into the medicinal soup. He couldn't tell her any of this. He couldn't let the demon child realize that everything he did was to get rid of the demon. Otherwise, the demon child and Ning Xuema's soul would coexist as a threat. Therefore, he could only let Ning Xuema think that he was going to kill her and boil her alive. The process of getting rid of the demon was very cruel, and he had hesitated before. However, since she could kill him without hesitation in her previous life to save others, why should he hesitate for her? Besides, he was also trying to save her. In order to prevent her soul from being devoured by the demon child and truly perishing in this world. Chapter 1322. In order to prevent her soul from being devoured by the devil child and truly perishing between heaven and earth. Therefore, he could only use this method. He believed that before he lost his memory, he also wanted to use this method. Otherwise, he wouldn't have prepared so many medicinal herbs in advance. He told himself that he couldn't regret it, but seeing her suffer in there, he was in so much pain that he almost suffocated. Once it started, it couldn't end. Xuema. Bear with it, another wave of pain that was worse than death. Ning Xuema's vision began to blur again. Her limbs were numb from the pain, and she didn't feel like her own. At first, the pain was like a burn between flesh and blood. Later, it became an excruciating pain. Now, she felt that her soul was being burned and melting bit by bit. In her hazy consciousness, she heard Shinjuli's voice. His voice was trembling slightly. Xuema, bear with it. Ning Xuema wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. Irony. What a fucking irony. Bear with it, and boil it for a while longer? This was like extorting a confession by torture. When someone fainted, they would be splashed with a basin of cold water to wake them up. When they were awake, they would suffer endless torment. The heat seemed to flow into her heart. It was so hot that it was constantly contracting. It was so painful that she wanted to kill herself. She felt that she couldn't bear it anymore. She had no reason to bear it anymore. Let her die. Let her die a quick death. She really didn't want to live anymore. Living was too tiring, really too tiring. She was destined to be a lone star. She was destined to lead an army. Every step she took was a disaster. She was destined to be alone for a lifetime. Ha 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 ha. She finally caused the death of a group of friends. After causing the death of Shinjuli, who used to love her, she caused the death of herself in such a tragic way. Great, that's great. She should be thrown into the 18 levels of hell and into the boiling oil for a world-destroying demon like her. Ha ha ha. You've done a great job. The punishment was right. Now that she was in the frying pan, could she just go and meet her death neatly? Could she be given an ending where her soul was destroyed? She didn't want to reincarnate anymore. She wanted her soul to scatter into a million pieces and then turn into a wisp of light, never to wake up again. The heavens seemed to have heard the sincere prayers of this inauspicious person and decided to take care of her for once. Ning Xuema gradually felt the pain fade away, and the sounds around her gradually disappeared. All the emotions in her heart were drawn away bit by bit, and her mind became blank. She felt that her body was getting lighter and lighter, and her consciousness was getting heavier and heavier. Finally, there was no more pain, only deep sleep. Within the Dantian's ruins of End, the fire was already tearing at the little Loli's clothes. The golden talisman was right in front of her eyes. She knelt on the ground, her face pale. She was sweating profusely as she struggled to support the last layer of the enchantment. Her entire body was engulfed in flames that were as tall as a person. The talisman stuck to the barrier and slowly melted it. The pure golden light shone on her body and burned small holes. She screamed again and again. The tongue of the fire slowly came in through the gaps of the enchantment and swallowed her body. The places that were burned by the fire instantly turned black. The wounds were so deep that her bones could be seen. The lower half of her body that was kneeling on the ground was almost melted by the fire. Her red dress was burning fiercely in the fire. The last layer of the enchantment was broken. In the little Loli's desperate eyes, the fire was overwhelming. She slowly closed her eyes. Was she going to start all over again? Starting all over again. Chapter 13:23. Suddenly, she seemed to have sensed something and opened her eyes. Momo had given up. She had fallen into a deep sleep. The little Loli's figure slowly faded. In the fire, she revealed a bloodthirsty smile and turned into countless streams of light, flying out of the ultimate. Shunjuli's face instantly turned pale. His divine sense could no longer sense Ning Xuema's existence. Impossible, impossible. He had probed before. Her soul was very strong, and she was at Earth rank level 9. The inner demon was only around level 8. She could not have been dissolved before the inner demon. Shunjuli's body trembled uncontrollably.
Then why?
Why couldn't he sense her existence?
Calm down.
Calm down. Shunjuli forced himself to calm down and carefully probed the situation in the cauldron with his divine sense. The more he looked, the more his heart sank. It was as if his heart had gradually sunk into ice water. The Ning Xuema in the cauldron was no longer Ning Xuema. Although that person was extremely weak, her demonic aura was soaring, reflecting the bronze cauldron red. Where did Ning Xuema go? Shunjuli did not give up and scanned her over and over again. Finally, he found a very faint white light on her body. The white light was somewhat weak, but there was a circle of enchantment protecting that white light. She was still there, but she had fallen into a deep sleep. Her body was controlled by the inner demon. Shunjuli did not know whether to be happy or sad. Looking at the increasingly intense red light in the cauldron, his eyes flashed with a touch of determination. No matter what, he, Shunjuli, must eradicate this demon today. This demon could not hold on for much longer. He raised his hand and a pure golden light was emitted, drilling into the cauldron. Ning Xuema felt her body suddenly warm up. Something drilled into her blood vessels and then firmly protected a certain part of her body. It was like a golden shield, emitting a faint golden light. She probed with her divine sense. That was the place where Ning Xuema's soul was sleeping. She tried to use her telekinesis, but it bounced back instantly, almost causing her telekinesis to collapse. Why did Shunjuli suddenly protect Ning Xuema's soul? Didn't he want to kill her? An ominous feeling suddenly flashed through the little Loli's heart. Before she could react, heavenly lightning fell from the sky and heavily struck her body. Instantly, a ring of sparks burst out.
Off!
Ning Xuema screamed. She felt that half of her soul had melted in an instant, and her body had turned black from being struck by lightning. Ning Xuema screamed, "Shunjuli, you actually want to kill Momo? How can you be so heartless?" Shunjuli didn't say anything. Another heavenly thunder struck down with the force of a thunderbolt. Ning Xuema used the last of her telekinesis to set up a bounded domain to block most of the power, but there was still a fish that escaped the net. Her soul melted, and only a small part of it was left. In the severe pain, she suddenly understood something. She used her divine sense to explore the location of the golden shield, and her heart suddenly sank. She was fooled. From the beginning, Shunjuli didn't want to deal with Ning Xuema, but her. He wanted to completely destroy her. If she guessed correctly, the light golden thing should be used by Shunjuli to protect Ning Xuema's soul. He sacrificed her body to protect her soul, and then completely destroyed himself. Ning Xuema's face was pale. Once the third heavenly thunder struck, she would completely disappear from this world. Although Ning Xuema's body would also be destroyed, her soul would still be there. Shunjuli would rebuild her body. Chapter 13:24. She was fooled. She was fooled. If she had known earlier, she would have formed a symbiotic soul with Ning Xuema. That way, she could still threaten Shunjuli. But now, he was completely protecting Ning Xuema's soul. She couldn't form a symbiotic soul with Ning Xuema. That was his plan from the beginning. She was actually fooled. She thought that he really wanted to kill Ning Xuema. He even planned to dissipate his own soul and wait for Ning Xuema to reincarnate. This loss was really too big. But now, she had no other choice. She could only watch herself completely disappear from this world. Her vision turned black, and she felt that her body was melting inch by inch with an irreversible force. When the second bolt of divine lightning struck, Shunjuli's face was as pale as paper, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He checked Ning Xuema's soul and heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, under the protection of his soul, her soul wasn't harmed by the divine lightning. That faint golden light was actually a part of his own soul. He had separated it to protect the sleeping Ning Xuema. The two bolts of divine lightning that struck down just now were all used on his soul. They didn't hurt Ning Xuema. This was really a way to hurt the enemy by 1,000, but Shunjuli was determined to completely eliminate that demon today, so he didn't care about the cost of damaging his soul. His body trembled slightly, and he weakly held onto the bronze cauldron. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and summoned the third bolt of divine lightning. With this bolt, the demon would completely disappear. Momo. Shunjuli's heart sank. A red shadow suddenly flashed in midair, and at the same time, a red light carrying a vast demonic aura flew towards him. A white light flew out of Shunjuli's sleeve and collided with the red light in midair. The divine lightning struck at the same time. Three forces that were enough to destroy heaven and earth collided with each other, and an intense energy burst out. That red shadow was Xue Ilan. His face was pale from the shock, and he was knocked back a few steps by the shock wave. Kacha! A crisp sound rang out, as if something had broken. Shunjuli's heart sank. A wizardry barrier. The aftermath of the three forces had actually broken the barrier he had set up above the cauldron. Xue Ilan naturally wouldn't let go of this rare opportunity. He jumped into the boiling hot medicinal soup like lightning, endured the piercing pain, and carried Ning Xuema up. He looked at the unconscious Ning Xuema in his arms. Her face was as pale as snow, and her body was covered with wounds. It was almost impossible to see her original appearance. His hands trembled slightly. How could his Momo be injured to this extent? How could Shunjuli do such a cruel thing to her? A ball of white light flew towards him with the fury of thunder. Shunjuli said coldly, "Let her go." Xue Ilan couldn't dodge in time, so he could only resist. Although Shunjuli was seriously injured, he was still a god, and his power was far above his. The white light became stronger and stronger, and the red light was forced to retreat. After resisting this wave with great difficulty, he had already retreated 7 or 8 steps. At this time, Ning Xuema in his arms suddenly moved. His body stiffened, and he lowered his head to ask, "Momo?" Shunjuli's heart trembled. He sensed that Ning Xuema's soul under his soul was gradually waking up. She woke up? Shunjuli didn't know whether to be happy or sad.
She woke up at this time.
Could he still continue to strike her body in this moment? The white light had weakened a lot. The red light took advantage of the situation to chase after it, and the two returned to a stalemate. Chapter 13:25. Ning Xuema's soul slowly woke up and found that she was trapped in a pale golden cover. She could faintly smell Shun Juli's breath on it. Was this Shun Juli's new way of torturing her? Ning Xuema's heart was suddenly filled with fear. She subconsciously hit the pale golden cover with all her might. However, the cover was impregnable and didn't budge at all. Would there be some kind of fire coming out of it to burn her in a while? Thinking of this, Ning Xuema began to crazily hit the cover. However, it was the soul of a god after all. Her soul colliding with it was like hitting a stone with an egg. The more she couldn't get out, the more afraid she was. The more afraid she was, the more desperately she wanted to get out. Her soul faintly felt like it was going to dissipate. Shun Juli originally planned to lock up Ning Xuema's soul, but later she hit it too hard. Her soul felt like it was going to dissipate. He could only withdraw his own soul and let her out. Ning Xuema felt as if she had been knocked out of the light golden barrier. Just as she let out a sigh of relief, a powerful suction force suddenly appeared above her. She didn't have time to react before her whole body was sucked up. Everything in front of her eyes turned black, and then light appeared again. Following that, she felt a familiar, bone-piercing pain in Shui Ilan's arms. Ning Xuema's eyelashes fluttered. He held his breath. Momo woke up at this time. Would she break free from his arms again? Shin Juli looked at Ning Xuema, who was gradually waking up, and a complicated light flashed through his eyes. He then looked at Shui Ilan's attentive look on Ning Xuema's face, and then looked at the way he held her intimately. It was as if a huge stone was pressing down on his heart. The white light suddenly intensified, forcing the red light to retreat. Shun Juli's voice was cold. Shui Ilan, let go of her. Ning Xuema's eyelashes fluttered, and she finally opened her eyes. Shui Ilan could feel Ning Xuema's gaze on him, but he couldn't spare a glance at her. He was almost defeated by Shun Juli's power. Ning Xuema moved a little in his arms. He was so angry that he almost passed out. He said helplessly, Momo, don't move. When Ning Xuema first woke up, she was in a daze. It took her a long time to recognize that the person hugging her was Shui Ilan. Her body stiffened, and she subconsciously wanted to push him away. However, when she looked at Shin Juli, her hands paused. In the end, she put them down and allowed Shui Ilan to hug her. Shun Juli naturally saw her series of movements. He felt a burst of anger in his heart and said in a deep voice, Ning Xuema, come here. Past? What was he doing there? Be thrown into the pot to be boiled again? Ning Xuema sneered but didn't say anything. Shun Juli saw that Ning Xuema was obediently nestled in Shui Ilan's arms, ignoring his words. Could it be that her soul was damaged, so she didn't hear his words? So Shun Juli repeated it again. This time, his tone was a little stiff. Ning Xuo, come here. Was he so persistent in wanting to boil her to death? Did he hate her to this extent? Ning Xuema suddenly wanted to laugh. Her once most intimate lover was now the person who wanted her to die the most. Today's sword points, in the past we were in the foam. The warmth in the hair, all for the floating pavilion. Haha. In fact, she didn't want to live anymore. She was finally free, but unexpectedly, she woke up again. Heaven was playing with her. Ning Xuema glanced at him. There was no emotion in her eyes. Her voice was so faint that it was almost inaudible. Shin Juli, do you want to kill me again? Shun Juli held his breath. Chapter 13:26. Shun Juli's breath caught in his throat. The demon in her body hadn't completely dissipated yet. He needed to examine her properly to see if she needed it. Ning Xuema's indifferent voice continued, I'll do it for you. Before she finished speaking, she turned her hand and condensed a sharp dagger. She didn't even blink as she ruthlessly stabbed towards her own chest. Momo, don't. Xiong. Two voices rang out at the same time. The dagger in Ning Xuema's hand was knocked out of her hand by Shun Juli's white light. Because of this distraction, Shui Ilan's red light fiercely smashed into Shun Juli's body. His body swayed, and his face became even paler. Shunjuli turned his hand and sent a white light towards Xue Ilan again. Xue Ilan was carrying a person after all, so it wasn't that convenient for him to fight back. In addition, his strength wasn't as good as Shinjuli's, so he was once again forced back by the white light. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Suddenly, a green light flew into the air and revolved around Xue Ilan. Although the green light was weak, it had a very strong healing effect. Xue Ilan's boiling blood actually calmed down under the effect of the green light. Momo. She actually helped him heal his injuries. Xue Ilan's eyes lit up, and his spirit was greatly aroused. Shinjuli's face turned pale. His eyes fell on Ning Xuema's body. Ning Xuema closed her eyes. She waved her hand, and a red dress appeared on her body. Blood flowed down like a small stream, but she didn't care at all. Her eyes turned to Shinjuli, and her voice was indifferent. Shinjuli, whether it's the previous life or this life, I don't owe you anything. I know you're a god, and we're not your match. If you insist on taking my life, then fine. I'll do it myself. If you're done with your revenge, let me go. Her face was as pale as snow, and her eyes were dark and gloomy. She looked at Shinjuli indifferently and said, If you want to kill me, I will do it myself. If you have enough revenge, then let me go. With a flip of her hand, she condensed a dagger and pressed it against her own chest. She stabbed it bit by bit. Her eyebrows didn't even wrinkle. She even smiled and said in a mocking tone, Dizun, you say the word. My life is yours to handle. You. She actually used an honorific to address him? Shunjuli clenched his fists in his sleeves. His face was as calm as still water. Ning Xuema, I'm only doing this to get rid of the demon in your body. Come here. The expression in Ning Xuema's dark eyes was hard to decipher. To get rid of the demon in her body. She didn't believe his stupid excuse. He was merely taking revenge for that nuisance, Wu Mo. He wanted to take revenge for the stab she gave him in his previous life. From the looks of it, he hasn't had enough yet, has he? He still wants to take my life, right? You don't have to do it. Xuema will do it herself. Ning Xuema's dagger pierced a few more times. Below, it was her beating heart. Shunjuli's breath stopped. I won't kill you. Come here. Let me see your wound. Her blood was still flowing. It stung his eyes. Xue Ilan's heart sank. He was afraid that she would really go over. Momo, Ning Xuema didn't have the slightest intention to go forward. Instead, she retreated a few steps. She sneered and said word by word, Don't cry crocodile tears. Shinjuli, I won't believe a single word you say. Shunjuli's voice had a trace of anger. Ning Xuema, do you think you can leave with him? Don't force your master to make a move. Master? Ning Xuema simply wanted to laugh out loud. What kind of master would cook his own disciple alive like him? Even if he had a deep hatred for his enemy, he might not be able to do such a vicious thing. Chapter 1327. Shunjuli was speechless. Since ancient times, only the master would expel the disciple. Since when did the disciple swear to not want the master anymore? Ning Xuema, don't mess around. I will explain everything to you slowly. No need. Ning Xuema interrupted him. Shunjuli, either you kill me today, or you let me go. I will leave with Xue Ilan. Leave with Xue Ilan? Shunjuli looked at her and said coldly, Ning Xuema, I always keep my word. If I say I won't kill you, then I won't kill you. But if you leave with Xue Ilan today, we will cut off all ties. Cut off all ties. He actually wanted to use this to threaten her? Shinjuli, aren't you overestimating yourself? Ning Xuema looked at him and revealed a mocking smile. She turned around and walked towards Xue Ilan. Her tone was so light that it almost disappeared with the wind. Shinjuli, you should have cut off all ties a long time ago. Shunjuli's face was pale, and his hands were trembling in his sleeves. He watched as Ning Xuema walked step by step towards Xue Ilan. His heart tightened inch by inch. It was as if she was walking out of his life and would never come back. He really wanted to rush up and take her back, but the words "should have cut off all ties a long time ago" nailed him to the ground. Maybe she really never loved him, whether it was in her previous life or this life. She was just using him, but in her previous life, she wanted his heart. In this life, she didn't do anything. Why did she leave? Blood was still dripping from her body. As she walked, the blood dripped onto the snow-white floor. It was bright and glaring. Shunjuli couldn't help but raise his hand. A white light covered her head. This was the light of healing. It could stop the pain and stop the bleeding. Shue Ilan's expression changed. He thought that Shue Ilan was going to pull Ning Xuema back again. He immediately raised his hand as well. The red light was released later but arrived first, directly meeting the white light. He thought that there would be an earth-shattering sound, but he didn't expect that the white light and red light would dissipate as soon as they touched. The red light didn't stop there and directly hit Shunjuli. Shunjuli's body swayed slightly before he steadied himself. He looked at Shue Ilan and curled his fingers slightly as if he wanted to do something. However, Ning Xuema's movement made his fingers freeze. Ning Xuema slowly raised her hand. A pair of shining ame piercings appeared in her palm. One of them was already broken, while the other was still intact. Shunjuli's eyes narrowed. This ame piercer gave him a vague sense of familiarity.
Clang.
With a crisp sound, the pair of ame piercings were thrown to the ground at Shunjuli's feet. Shunjuli, this is what you gave me before. Now, I'm returning it to you. I don't owe you anything anymore. Shunjuli was speechless. The pair of ame piercings had already gained intelligence. One of them was broken by Shue Ilan and lost its intelligence. The other one, however, was in perfect condition. Its spirituality was still there. Suddenly being abandoned, it seemed unwilling. It jumped up from the ground and flew in front of Ning Xuema as if it wanted to return to her body. Shue Ilan flicked his sleeve. The ame piercer fell to the ground again, as if it was blocked by a strong wind. There was another clang. The ame piercer felt wronged. It half raised its body and looked at Ning Xuema as if it didn't believe that Ning Xuema had really abandoned it. Ning Xuema directly threw herself into Shue Ilan's arms and closed her eyes. Shue Ilan, take me away. Chapter 13:28. No matter if it was her body or soul, they were both seriously injured. She had also reached her limit and couldn't hold on any longer. That pair of ame piercers had always been her favorite. When one of them broke, her heart ached so much that it almost bled. She had originally planned to trick Shunjuli into going to the Immortal Kingdom to find that blacksmith to fix it, but now there was no need. She didn't want it anymore. No matter if it was good or bad, she didn't want it anymore. Everything she was wearing right now was condensed from her spirit power. She didn't have a single thing that belonged to Shunjuli. If she wanted to break it off, then she would break it off completely and cleanly. Shue Ilan hugged her as if he was hugging a lost treasure. His voice was slightly choked. Momo, let's go home. His Momo was finally willing to leave with him. This time it was automatic. Ning Xuema closed her eyes and didn't say anything else. Shue Ilan looked at Shunjuli one last time. Shunjuli looked like he was nailed to the ground. He didn't have any intention of moving. Shue Ilan's lips hooked into a mysterious smile. He hugged Ning Xuema and turned into a streak of red light as he left. Ning Xuema's final words echoed in the air. Shunjuli, if you let me go this time, the next time we meet, we'll be enemies. Shunjuli's face was snow white as he stood there. If he insisted on stopping them, these two people wouldn't be able to escape. However, at this moment, he couldn't reach out his hand. They should have broken it off long ago. Should they have broken it off long ago? The next time they met, they would be enemies. Enemies. He had never thought that there would be a day when they would be enemies. Even when she was Shue Emo in his previous life, he hadn't thought of it. The ame piercers on the ground probably understood that they had been abandoned by their owner. They didn't move, and the light on their bodies dimmed quite a bit. Shunjuli raised his sleeve and sucked them into his hand. The broken one naturally didn't react. The good one also had a lifeless aura. They still carried the scent of their original owners, which was faint and fragrant. He closed his eyes and sensed their bodies. Intermittent, Sporadic scenes seemed to flash before his eyes. Great God, I really know how to ride a sword.
Ha ha ha.
Very good. Give me a ride. Ah. Guru, you're so heavy. You should go on a diet. Shun Juli felt suffocated. His heart seemed to be slowly clenched by something. He understood that this should be the scene of him and her before he lost his memories. It was actually so warm and funny. So he also had such a mischievous time. So the two of them used to be so harmonious. Countless emotions whizzed in and whizzed out. He stood there for a long time, as if he had become a fossilized statue.
Fire.
There was fire everywhere. Ning Xuemal felt as if she was about to melt under the golden light of the fire. She felt a burning pain all over her body, as if she had been thrown back into the cauldron. She ran as fast as she could, but she couldn't get out of the fire's range. Ning Xuema could only watch as she was slowly surrounded by the fire. Tongues of fire licked her clothes and devoured her flesh. Ning Xuema woke up from her deep sleep again. She was sweating profusely. Everywhere was red. Red walls, red decorations. It was very similar to the fire in her dream. Ning Xuema's body stiffened. Her mind was still a bit hazy. She struggled to escape, but once she moved, she pulled on the wounds on her body. She was in so much pain that her face turned pale. The pain made her suddenly wake up. She finally realized that this was the Demon Palace, her residence in her previous life. There was no fire. Chapter 13:29. Her body was still in unbearable pain. She had already treated it, but her skin still felt like it was cooked. Just a slight touch would cause her to feel unbearable pain. It caused her to not be able to sleep well. It was as if there was a fire burning in her heart all the time, causing her to be impatient. She had never suffered so much before. And this sin was brought by the person she thought she loved the most. Injustice, anger, despair. Countless negative emotions gathered in her chest and condensed into monstrous hatred. It made her heart feel as if there was a fire burning in her heart all the time, causing her to be impatient. She wanted to disregard everything and kill him again. She also wanted to pull him into the sea of fire and perish together. But she was temporarily unable to do all these, unable to do it. The only thing she could do was to cut him in half with a knife. Never come into contact with him again. As long as she opened her eyes, her chest would be boiling with countless negative emotions, making her want to explode. Could it be that these were the emotions after becoming a devil? That day in the cauldron, she finally chanted the incantation to attract the devil, but she did not feel that she had immediately become powerful. After that, she did not talk to the little loli again, so she was not sure whether she had become a devil or not. She had tried to look for the little loli in her dantian, but her dantian was silent and dark, and she could not find anything. Originally, when she had negative emotions in her heart, the little loli's voice would desperately tempt her. Now that her negative emotions were about to explode, she did not hear the little loli's voice again. Had he already entered the demonic path? So the little loli's goal was achieved, and she did not disturb her anymore? At that time, the little loli almost had the opportunity to promote the benefits of becoming a devil, saying that there was no love, no hatred, no resentment, no sadness, no joy. It was even more than the 4 elements that the monks preached. It was as if the 8 elements were all empty. But now she did not have any of those benefits. She could not think of anything right now. Once she thought of something, her head would explode with pain. To say that there were no benefits was not entirely true. That time when she was searching for the little loli in her dantian, a strand of psychokinesis touched something inside, and she actually heard a slight squeaking sound. Then, a strand of extremely strong psychokinesis came from that thing and directly entered her limbs and bones. That time, when she finished investigating and opened her eyes, she found that her power had increased by a large margin. She had just broken through to Earth rank level 9, but now she was more than halfway there. She had the intention of breaking through to Heaven rank level 1, but so what if he broke through? She was still no match for that person. He still couldn't throw that person into the pot for revenge. This feeling was like a commoner fighting against a billionaire. There was no hope of winning at all. Then what was the point of leveling up? At her current level, although her lifespan was longer, she would still die one day. Once they reached the heaven rank, they wouldn't age or die. Am I a devil now? If he went out again, wouldn't he be hunted down by all sorts of righteous forces? And now, the Sun Moon sect was the largest organization in the righteous Tao. If they wanted to kill her, Helian Xiao, Yalu Jing'en, and the smiling faces of her fellow disciples who had celebrated her return that day flashed through her mind. These people were all her friends, and they had never done anything wrong to her. Some of them were even her closest friends. Perhaps when they met again in the martial arts world, she would become their enemy. Looking at the things around her, she suddenly felt a sense of boredom. Chapter 1330. She suddenly felt a sense of weariness in her heart. Looking at the things around her, she felt even more frustrated. She closed her eyes and forcefully suppressed this feeling of weariness. She suppressed all the images that were involuntarily churning in her mind. Every time she moved her body, it hurt terribly. The most painful thing was not her body, but her soul. Her soul had suffered a great deal of damage, and she could only rely on sleeping to recover bit by bit. Every time Shui Ilan came to see her, he would see her sleeping soundly. But even in her sleep, her brows would often furrow, and there would be cold sweat on her face, as though she was enduring some kind of pain. When he applied medicine for her, he tried his best to be gentle. But her injuries were too deep, and there were too many wounds. Every time Shui Ilan applied medicine for her, she would furrow her brows tightly in her sleep, and there would be a look of pain on her face. Ning Xuema's few moments of consciousness were no different from when she was asleep. She would just lie quietly on the bed, staring blankly at something. When Shui Ilan spoke to her, she would not respond. It was as though she was living in her own world. Ning Xuema spent a month of this sleepy life, and her injuries were finally much better. Only her mental state did not improve much. Shui Ilan came to talk to her every day, especially with some interesting things to make her laugh, but she did not respond at all. Finally, there was one time when he forcefully turned her face, forcing her to look at him. "Momo, look at me. Talk to me." Ning Xuema was indeed very cooperative. She looked at him motionlessly, and there was no light in her eyes. She was like a wooden doll that had lost its soul. Shui Ilan was creeped out by her stare, and finally, he surrendered. Another month passed, and Ning Xuema's injuries gradually healed. However, her mental state was still very weak. Although she was awake, it seemed like she would fall asleep at any moment. The godly doctor that Shui Ilan had captured said in a trembling voice, "Perhaps you should bring this lady out for a walk." Shui Ilan tightened his grip on the teacup, causing it to shatter. What if they bumped into Shen Julie again? He looked at him coldly. "If you can't think of another way, you can go die." The godly doctor was so worried that his hair had turned white. He was so anxious that he scratched his ears and cheeks. In the end, he said helplessly, "This lady is suffering from a mental illness and needs time to recuperate. Let her walk around the garden and look at the flowers and clouds. Maybe she will feel better, and the knot in her heart will slowly be untied." Shui Ilan. Where did flowers come from in the demon realm? His eyes darkened. Just as he was about to pinch this godly doctor to death, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. He paused, and after a while, a sincere smile appeared on his face. 3 days later, in the quiet room, warm sunlight shone in. Ning Xuema slowly opened her eyes and looked at the flickering sunlight in a daze. This was the scene that Shui Ilan saw when he came in. The sunlight shone on her face, giving her a gentle layer of warmth. Some of the sunlight also reflected in her eyes, and she finally looked a little spirited. Her long eyelashes could be seen clearly under the sunlight, leaving a shadow under her eyes. She really needed to go out and bask in the sunlight. She looked pretty good under the sunlight. Shui Ilan walked in front of Ning Xuema. His tall figure blocked some of the sunlight. With his back facing the light, he held her hand. "Momo, do you want to go out for a walk?" She had been basking in the sunlight for so long, and her fingers were still cold. Chapter 1331. Moreover, Without the effect of the sunlight, her face was still cold and emotionless. Ning Xuema quietly looked at him for a long time, so long that Xue Yilan thought she was distracted again. She tilted her head and finally said, "No." When Xue Yilan heard her voice, a warm current surged in his heart. She hadn't said a word for 2 months. Now that she finally opened her mouth, although it was only 2 words, it was a good start. Her voice was still a bit hoarse, no longer as clear and pleasant as before. She was also becoming more and more dispirited, not interested in anything. Every day, she would stay in her room, either sleeping or daydreaming. Every day, Xue Yilan lived in fear and trepidation. He was afraid that one day, she would fall asleep and never wake up again. "Momo, how did you become like this?" When she was Xue Emo, although she was indifferent, he could still see her smile often. When she was Ning Xuema, she was the one who laughed the most. She was always in high spirits, just like a proud little lion. But now it was as if she had lost all her emotions, like a wooden doll that couldn't move or smile. He had to find the original her. Today, he must drag her out for a walk. Xue Yilan said again, "Momo, it's sunny outside. Don't you want to go out and see?" After a while, there was no response. Ning Xuema seemed to have fallen asleep again. Xue Yilan said a few more words to coax her to go out, but she didn't respond. She just stood there with her back facing Xue Yilan, lost in thought. Xue Yilan looked at Ning Xuema, who had given up on herself. He couldn't tell if he was angry or what. He suddenly bent down and picked her up. Looking at her, he smiled gently. "Momo, since you don't want to go, I'll carry you out." Ning Xuema. She looked at his slightly evil smile, and her body stiffened slightly. Then, she slowly relaxed, found a comfortable position in his arms, and closed her eyes. Xue Yilan. At the very least, it meant that Momo didn't reject his embrace. This could be considered a good thing among the bad, right? Xue Yilan tried to find joy in the midst of bitterness. Sighing, he carried her and walked outside. Along the way, Ning Xuema quietly nestled in his arms, as if she had fallen asleep. Wherever Xue Yilan passed by, countless fiendish demons knelt down. Just as they were about to shout, "Long live the demon emperor," he flicked his sleeve, and those fiendish demons shut their mouths. Momo needed to recuperate. They couldn't disturb her. After Xue Yilan walked past, countless demons looked at each other and saw their own eyes widened in amazement. Their demon king. When? He was so careful, as if he was hugging a fragile treasure. Their curiosity was piqued. Every one of them wished they could become clairvoyants just to see who that woman was. Unfortunately, the demon king hid her very well. Even with so many eyes, they still couldn't see what the woman in the demon king's arms looked like. In the demon realm's garden, indescribable flowers bloomed one after another. Red, yellow, purple, hundreds of flowers were in full bloom, blooming fiercely and fiercely. A cool breeze blew past, as if it was a rain of petals. The sun was shining brightly, and the fragrance of flowers floated in the air. Xue Yilan lowered his head and said gently, "Momo, wake up."
Look.
Chapter 1332. Ning Xuema slowly opened her eyes and met Xue Yilan's affectionate gaze. She looked at him for a while, then looked away and looked at the flowers around her. They were really beautiful, very beautiful. The barren soil of the demon world was not suitable for flowers to grow. Demons, who were naturally cruel creatures, also did not cultivate the elegant hobby of appreciating flowers. Therefore, not a single flower had bloomed in the demon world for 10,000 years. It was also late autumn, when hundreds of flowers withered. In order to make such a large sea of flowers, Xue Yilan must have put in a lot of effort. She quietly looked at the flowers in a daze, not knowing what she was thinking. A beautiful and bewitching flower suddenly appeared in front of her, followed by Xue Yilan's smile. "Momo, look, these are your favorite flowers. I purposely plucked some from hell and brought them back." In fact, Xue Yilan's words were very implicit. How did he pick some? He pulled out all the red spider lilies on the side of the bridge of helplessness. As a result, The bridge of helplessness was still bare. He held a large pile of flowers and rushed back to the demon world. He planted them in his own garden and let people take good care of them. He nourished them with telekinesis, just so that Ning Xuema could appreciate them today. Ning Xuema stretched out her hand and took the bouquet of flowers in the palm of her hand to play with. The bright red spider lily slowly bloomed on her fingertips. The petals swayed, like a bright flame, quietly burning in her hand. The red petals made her hand seem even whiter, as if there was no blood in it. Ning Xuema looked at the beautiful and bewitching flower, and her eyes flashed with an unknown light. The red spider lilies in her hand left the ground and slowly withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. A red light flashed. Shui Yilan reflexively wanted to inject telekinesis into the flower, but Ning Xuema blocked him. She looked at the gradually withered flower and said in a mocking tone, "Flowers from hell should live in hell." Shui Yilan was stunned. Finally, he slowly tightened his arms and buried her in his arms. There was a trace of heartache in his voice. "Momo, I will accompany you in hell." Ning Xuema slowly closed her eyes and remained silent. Shui Yilan stood in the garden with her in his arms for a long time. It was so long that the sun was already hanging high in the sky, emitting a vigorous golden light. The two of them were both dressed in red, and standing in the colorful garden was indescribably pleasing to the eye. Ning Xuema was breathing evenly in his arms. She seemed to have fallen asleep. He looked at Ning Xuema's quiet sleeping face, and his thin lips curved slightly, revealing a faint smile. "Momo, I'm willing to endure your hell." Now, the entire demonic world knew that the demonic king had someone he loved the most. He accompanied and cared for her, and even used his telekinesis to nourish a large garden, just to win her smile. The garden. A large field of flowers. Most of the demons didn't know what flowers were. If they were asked if they liked flowers, they would ask, "What are flowers? Is it good?" It was inedible and tasteless. It was beautiful. The demons would be even more disdainful. "It's not delicious, and there's no demonic energy. What's the use of looking good?" That was why a demon's thinking was so simple and crude. It was just so boring. So Shui Yilan's romantic way of planting a large garden for Ning Xuema might be romantic enough to make them want to scream, but in the eyes of the demons, the demonic king seemed to be a bit improper. The people of the demonic world were very worried, and the ministers of the demonic world were also very worried. But a small group of people were very happy. Chapter 1333. However, a small group of people were very happy. They finally found a reason to rebel and establish themselves as kings, making the demon realm independent from the demon realm. Ever since the Great War of Immortals and Devils 3,000 years ago, only a small portion of the devil race was left. Shui Yilan then brought that small portion of the devil race to the demon realm. Through the gradual evolution, demon and devil had gradually merged into one, evolving into demons and devils. These years, the demons grew stronger bit by bit, and some demons had the idea of independence. They wanted to establish themselves as kings. No, they wanted to become the demon king, the demon king. The power pyramid of the demon palace was formed by the demon king and the three protectors. Shui Yilan had not returned to the demon palace for a long time, so one of the protectors in the demon palace began to have evil thoughts. He began to secretly gather troops, wanting to become the demon king himself. Bloodthirsty was an Earth rank level 9 great demon. In the demon realm, he was second only to Shui Yilan. He had always wanted to overthrow Shui Yilan, and now he finally found a good opportunity. However, he was not stupid. He would not start a rebellion right away. He wanted to build momentum first. Some rumors began to spread in the demon realm, such as, "The weather has been bad these days. It must be because of that vixen by the demon king's side. The war with the immortal realm failed again. It must be that vixen who brought bad luck. Why does the demon king favor her so much? Our demon realm has always respected strength. That vixen looks like she can be blown away by the wind. She needs protection wherever she goes. How can she be favored by the demon king? The demon king must have been blinded by her. There were countless rumors like this, and the more they spread, the worse it sounded. The momentum was enough, and the show began. In the Demon Palace, ministers began to talk about all kinds of bad things about Ning Xuema. According to the signs of the heavens, she was a disaster. Their wise and mighty emperor could not have such a disaster by his side. She would endanger the demon realm, and so on. Shui Ilan's aura became stronger and colder. Looking at the three ministers kneeling below and listening to their fierce criticism of Ning Xuema, he finally could not help but take action and suppress her. The Demon Palace was covered in blood. Everyone was silent out of fear, and the rumors seemed to have stopped. Late at night, Bloodthirsty Protector's mansion. Bloodthirsty stood in the courtyard, looking at the dark clouds covering the bright moon little by little. He gave a mysterious smile. The calm before the storm. Another day, the sky was clear, and sunlight filled the air. Shui Ilan held Ning Xuema in his arms as they walked through the sea of flowers. Behind them, there was a chubby boy who was about 3 or 4 years old. He was the servant boy that Shui Ilan had given to Ning Xuema. Shui Ilan found that Ning Xuema seemed to like children more in the past. She liked chubby and cute things. Therefore, he tried to bring the cutest and most adorable child in the entire devil world into the Devil Palace. He gave it a chubby name, Tang Yuan, and gave it to Ning Xuema. Shui Ilan observed for a few days. Ning Xuema did not have much of a reaction when she saw Tang Yuan. She just sat there quietly and did not say anything. At first, Tang Yuan was still a little restrained in front of her, but later on, he chattered nonstop. Although Ning Xuema never responded to him, she did not reject Tang Yuan's approach. Moreover, the gloominess between her brows seemed to dissipate a little. Therefore, Shui Ilan allowed Tang Yuan to get closer and closer to Ning Xuema. In the end, Tang Yuan got a small bed of his own in the quiet room. Sticking to Ning Xuema, Shui Ilan looked at Tang Yuan's small bed and gritted his teeth. Chapter 1334. Shui Ilan looked at Tang Yuan's small bed and clenched his teeth. He had never stayed overnight in this quiet room before, but this white and fat dumpling actually managed to get a bed in just a few days. Now, Tang Yuan had become Ning Xuema's little tail, following her wherever she went. Tang Yuan followed behind her, panting. His little face was a little red from exhaustion. He said in a childish voice, Your Majesty, walk slower." I can't keep up. Why would he follow a burden when he was strolling in the garden? Shui Ilan wanted to shake Tang Yuan off and walk even faster. Tang Yuan tried his best to run forward with his 2 short legs, but he could not catch up no matter how hard he tried. In the end, he was tripped by a branch and fell to the ground. He was stunned. Shui Ilan's figure was already far away. He suddenly burst into tears, his face full of grievance. Momo, Tang Yuan can't catch up to you. Don't you want Tang Yuan anymore? His cries traveled far and wide. Ning Xuema's eyelashes trembled. She opened her eyes and looked at Shui Ilan quietly. Shui Ilan felt a little guilty under her gaze. His body stiffened, and he stopped in his tracks. Tang Yuan saw that the red figure in front of him had stopped. He stopped crying and chased after her with a smile. Shui Ilan looked at the white ball rolling behind him. The corner of his mouth twitched. The white ball rolled in front of him and sat down. Its apple-like face was covered in sweat. Suddenly, there was a faint smell of blood in the air. Shui Ilan's eyes darkened. He gently put Ning Xuema down. Momo, stay here for a while. I'll go take care of some things. I'll be back soon. He set up a protective barrier for Ning Xuema and ordered the 8 experts to protect her in the dark. Only then did he turn into a red light and fly towards the Demon Palace. Ning Xuema's injuries had almost recovered. She was now at Earth Stage Level 9. Within the Demon Palace, as long as she didn't want to, no one could hurt her. Actually, the people that Shui Ilan had arranged for were not as experienced as Ning Xuema in terms of level and combat experience. However, Shui Ilan was afraid that she would lose her will to live and not resist at all. That was why he set up a bunch of barriers and troops to protect her. Ning Xuema stood there calmly, looking at the rolling clouds in the distance. No one knew what she was thinking. The smell of blood was getting stronger. Ning Xuema frowned uncomfortably. In the distance, a small group of rebels was rushing over with a thick stench of blood. Their faces were ferocious, and it was obvious that they had gone berserk from the killing. When they saw Ning Xuema in the sea of flowers, their eyes lit up. With a whistle, the rebels from all walks of life began to gather in the garden. They wanted to take down Ning Xuema and force Shui Ilan to submit. Ning Xuema stood in the layers of barriers. The several demon world experts who were protecting her were fighting with the rebels. Blood flowed like a river, and flesh and blood flew everywhere. The scene was extremely tragic. However, there were more and more rebels at the converging path. The 8 experts fell one by one. Tang Yuan was so scared that he hugged Ning Xuema's calf and trembled. Ning Xuema had seen such a scene many times in her previous life and this life, so she did not have much of a reaction. The 8 experts all fell. The rebels began to attack the barrier that Shui Ilan had set up around her. Ning Xuema still stood there indifferently, without any intention of resisting. In fact, she did not want to live anymore. She was too tired in this life. If she could die here, it would be a form of relief. Perhaps she would return to her own world and bid farewell to this unlucky world. She would have no more interactions with the people in this world. Tang Yuan, who was hugging her calf, trembled even more. Chapter 1335. Tang Yuan, who was hugging her calf, trembled even more violently. However, when he realized that the rebel army had already broken through a layer of enchantment, he made up his mind and pushed Ning Xuema back. His young voice was filled with determination.
Momo.
Run quickly. I'll attract their attention. After saying that, he ran towards the rebel army, trying to attract their attention. Ning Xuema's gaze fell on Tang Yuan, who was trembling but facing the enemy's back. She sighed. No matter what, she had to save this child first. With a flick of her sleeve, Tang Yuan was sucked back. She held him in her arms and soared into the sky, flying into the distance. Tang Yuan was still in shock in her arms. Coincidentally, Shui Ilan rushed back to the garden. When he saw that Ning Xuema was safe and sound and that she was still holding Tang Yuan in her arms, he finally relaxed. He waved his hand, and the countless demon army behind him took down the rebel army. Shui Ilan looked at Ning Xuema carefully and heaved a sigh of relief. He asked, Momo, do you want to go with me to deal with these rebel armies? Ning Xuema shook her head.
No.
Shui Ilan sighed and picked her up. Then I'll send you back. He casually picked up Tang Yuan, who was jumping on the ground and trying to pounce into Ning Xuema's arms. With a few leaps, he returned to the demon palace. He placed Ning Xuema on the bed and instructed Tang Yuan, take good care of her. Tang Yuan nodded his head. I will definitely take good care of Momo. Don't worry, Your Majesty. After Shui Ilan left, Tang Yuan moved a small stool and sat in front of Ning Xuema. He began to chatter again. Ning Xuema looked at Tang Yuan, and her eyes finally softened. Tang Yuan was thirsty after talking for a long time. He poured himself a glass of water and gulped it down. Then, he looked at Ning Xuema in a daze. Ning Xuema averted her gaze and looked out of the window. Tang Yuan also looked out of the window. His big eyes lit up and he hugged Ning Xuema's calf. Momo, let's go watch the show too. Let's see how His Majesty punishes those bad guys. Ning Xuema subconsciously refused, but she could not stand Tang Yuan's pleas. She sighed and finally stood up, taking the initiative to walk out of the room. Inside the meeting hall, Shui Ilan sat high above. Looking down at the kneeling officials, his expression was difficult to discern. All the remaining rebels had their acupoints sealed and were thrown to the ground. Bloodthirsty received the best treatment. He was tied up tightly, like a rice dumpling. At the same time, all of his acupoints were sealed, rendering him completely immobile. Bloodthirsty didn't know why Shui Ilan had brought them to the meeting hall. Shouldn't he kill them directly? Soon, he got the answer. Shui Ilan played with a jade talisman and said casually, Demon Emperor Shui Ilan is obsessed with women and doesn't care about the overall situation of the demon world. We should overthrow the old emperor and establish a new one. Is this your reason? Bloodthirsty and the other demons' faces turned pale, but now that things had come to this, it was better to say it straightforwardly. Therefore, Bloodthirsty stared at Xue Ilan and said viciously, "That's right. You're no longer worthy of being our demon emperor." After Bloodthirsty finished speaking, he waited for Xue Ilan's fatal blow, but after waiting for a long time, nothing happened. Xue Ilan smiled instead. His smile was indescribably gentle and elegant, like an elegant scholar. It was impossible to associate him with the cruel and bloodthirsty demon emperor. Xue Ilan said lazily, "You're right. I'm indeed not suitable to continue being the demon emperor." Bloodthirsty's eyes widened and he choked, not knowing how to react. Chapter 1336. The demon ministers were shocked at first, then they suddenly knelt down. "Your Majesty, please be careful with your words." Xue Ilan looked at the demon ministers kneeling down and revealed a cynical smile. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly looked at the door, then slowly stood up and walked down step by step. Bloodthirsty looked at Xue Ilan walking towards him with an unfathomable smile. His body stiffened and his face turned pale. Was Xue Ilan finally going to deal with him? What kind of torture would it be? He couldn't help but quickly go through the torture of the demon world in his mind, and his body trembled slightly. He was getting closer, even closer. The closer he got, the stronger the pressure on Xue Ilan. Bloodthirsty felt Xue Ilan's oppressive aura getting closer and closer. His face turned pale, and his heart beat wildly. He closed his eyes and waited for the torture to come. The oppressive aura was getting stronger and stronger. In the end, Xue Ilan walked past him without even looking at him and walked towards the door. Bloodthirsty. The demons. Bloodthirsty turned around fiercely, wanting to see what Xue Ilan was going to do. When he turned around, he was first dazzled by the sunlight outside. Then, a peerless beauty in a bright red dress slowly walked out of the halo. Words could no longer describe her beauty. Her eyebrows were exquisite, and her skin was like jade. However, there was a touch of indifference on her face, as if nothing could affect her. It was Ning Xuema. She was the vase girl that caused the emperor to miss the morning assembly. Xue Ilan held Ning Xuema's hand and smiled. "Momo, why are you here?" Ning Xuema lowered her head and glanced at Tang Yuan. This little guy who had never seen the world rolled his eyes. He suddenly saw so many important people, and his little face turned red with excitement. He desperately tugged at the corner of Ning Xuema's skirt, looking eager to go in. Ning Xuema glanced at the scene in the hall and said indifferently, "Tang Yuan wants to come and take a look." Xue Ilan looked down at the pink and white doll. For the first time, he felt that this little fellow wasn't too much of an eyesore. Xue Ilan held Ning Xuema's hand and walked into the hall. "Momo, come." Ning Xuema let her hold her hand and slowly walked towards the main hall. Both of them were dressed in red. One of them was elegant and affectionate, while the other had an exquisite and indifferent appearance. When they stood together, they were an indescribable match. Before anyone could react, Xue Ilan had already placed Ning Xuema in his previous seat. Looking at the dumbstruck expressions of the demon race below, he curled his lips and revealed a meaningful smile. "This seat is most suitable for her." After saying that, he casually bowed to Ning Xuema. "Is that so, my Lord Demon Emperor?" Ning Xuema was speechless. She glanced at Xue Ilan and didn't say anything. The demon race's ministers reacted as if they had been thrown into boiling water. For a moment, they were all agitated and furious. Another loyal minister suddenly stood up and knelt down heavily. "Lord Demon Emperor, please reconsider." Xue Ilan raised his eyebrows. "No one can stop what I have decided. She's just a pretty vase. How can she be worthy of being our demon emperor?" "Your Majesty, I don't agree." "Your Majesty, please don't be blinded by beauty. Do something that will shock the world. She only has a beautiful shell, but she's sick and needs people to protect her wherever she goes. How can such a good-for-nothing be worthy of being our demon emperor?" Ridiculous. Too ridiculous. Your Majesty, please reconsider. Below, another group of people knelt down. Everyone's faces were filled with disbelief. Chapter 1337. Everyone's face was filled with disbelief, anger, and many other emotions. They all looked at Ning Xuema with disdain and disdain. Their demon realm was currently in troubled times. They should have worked hard and united as one. They should have a shrewd and powerful demon emperor to lead them to make a comeback. How could they let a good-for-nothing woman be their honorable demon emperor? If this spread out, it would be a joke in the three realms. No, absolutely not. A highly respected minister in the demon realm kowtowed until his head was bleeding. His voice was full of sorrow. Your Majesty. This old minister thinks that this woman is a scourge. This minister boldly requests Your Majesty to consider the overall situation and get rid of this evildoer. Kill her. Kill her. Get rid of the evildoer for the people. Kill the evildoer. Kill the evildoers. For a moment, the crowd was indignant. Because of this woman, their demon emperor was dispirited. Because of this woman, their demon emperor did not think about improving himself and did not consider the overall situation of the demon realm. Every day, he only thought about pleasing her and did many things that they thought were inconceivable. Ning Xuema indifferently swept a glance at the group of people who wanted nothing more than to pounce on her and tear her apart. The corners of her lips curled up slightly. She did not expect that when she came to the demon realm, she would be treated as Bao Si, Su Daji, and the like. Hee. Shui Ilan listened silently at first. His handsome face did not have a trace of emotion. When the following people finished speaking, he slowly stood up and walked to the highly respected minister. There seemed to be a hint of a smile in his tone. You don't agree? The minister trembled violently under his pressure, but he still firmly said, this minister does not agree.
Shui
Ilan's hand clenched in the air and the minister instantly exploded. Not even his bones were left behind. He was shattered into thousands of pieces. The smell of blood instantly filled the hall. The shadow of death shrouded everyone's head. Shui Ilan walked to the second person. The smile on his face was still faint, as if what he had just crushed was just a watermelon. He looked down at the person condescendingly. What about you? Do you agree? The second person's body trembled violently. He couldn't even speak a complete sentence. He looked at Shui Ilan as if he was looking at a devil. This subject. He repeated the word subject for a long time but couldn't say a single word. Shui Ilan's smile gradually disappeared. With a clench of his hand, the second person went to accompany the first person. Shui Ilan smiled faintly as he looked at the pool of blood where the man had been standing. You're just too long-winded. He slowly walked up to the third person. The third person was so scared that he was trembling like a sieve. Before Shui Ilan could ask him anything, he shouted, This subject agrees. This subject agrees. We will obey the orders of the demon emperor. Shui Ilan smiled with satisfaction and said lightly, Get up. That minister stood up, trembling. With this person taking the lead, countless people trembled as they stood up and echoed. This subject also agrees. This subject also agrees. This subject will follow the orders of the demon emperor. Only then did Shui Ilan leisurely walk back to the main hall and sat at the side. Bloodthirsty looked at the sudden change in the situation. He could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. He was going to die anyway. Before he died, he might as well curse to his heart's content. Shui Ilan, do you think this kind of violent suppression will be effective? You can shut our mouths, but can you shut the mouths of the people of the demon world? Aren't you afraid that the demon world that you worked so hard to gather will be disloyal? Chapter 1338. Aren't you afraid that the demons will be disheartened and become a pile of loose sand again? You're really blind. You actually want to push a beautiful vase up to be the demon emperor? Is she worthy? We demons have always respected martial strength. The strongest person is the demon emperor. I'm not as good as others. I admit defeat to you, but I refuse to accept it. The entire demon realm refuses to accept it. She can't even compare to my weakest soldier. What right does she have to be our demon emperor? Does she have two big legs to serve you well? The last sentence was simply unbearable. Shui Yilan's eyes darkened. Just as he was about to raise his hand to pinch Bloodthirsty to death, he inadvertently raised his head and suddenly paused. Although the people in the hall didn't dare to say anything, their expressions were extremely indignant. They looked at Ning Xuema with eyes full of disdain and hatred, as if they were looking at an enemy. Shui Yilan's heart sank. Indeed, Bloodthirsty was telling the truth. He couldn't rely on violence to suppress everyone. He could suppress them for a while, but he couldn't suppress them forever. Like this, even if he pushed Ning Xuema up, other people would only treat her as a cover and wouldn't take her seriously. In the future, there would be no end to the chaos. Who knows, maybe when the council disbanded, a large portion of the devils would find an opportunity to leave. The popularity that he had painstakingly regained would once again be in disarray. Unless Ning Xuema made a move, Shui Yilan couldn't help but glance at Ning Xuema. Ning Xuema didn't have any intention of replying. Her gaze fell on Tang Yuan. Her expression was indifferent and cold. No one could tell what she was thinking. However, looking at her current appearance, she really didn't have any intention of making a move. In the past, she was proud and couldn't be looked down upon. If anyone really offended her, she would definitely make them pay 10 times or 100 times the price. But now, she didn't seem to care about anything. Other than indifference, there was only indifference in her eyes. Shui Yilan felt that his head had swelled up. Shui Yilan didn't say anything. The atmosphere suddenly turned cold. Everyone in the hall thought that Shui Yilan had nothing to say. They became even angrier and felt that Ning Xuema was an eyesore. Finally, a person with ulterior motives stood up and bowed respectfully. Our demon realm has always respected martial strength. This new demon king must be even more powerful. Why don't you show us some of your skills so that we can be convinced? Shui Yilan raised his eyes and looked at that person with a gaze as cold as ice. That person's remaining words were instantly frozen. As Bloodthirsty saw someone answer his question, he became more stirred up. He shouted, "Yeah, if she has the ability, let her show us her power. Why are you cowering there? What right does a slut who only relies on her face and thighs to win the favor of men have to be our demon king? If you really have the ability, then show it to everyone. Don't talk about defeating others. If she can defeat this general beside me, I can reluctantly respect you as the demon king." Bloodthirsty pointed at the devil beside him. Everyone's gaze followed him. When they saw that it was the most incompetent devil among their generals, the whole hall burst into laughter. Ning Xuema's gaze lightly swept over and saw that the person was only Earth Stage Level 1. She didn't know how he became a general. That devil general saw Ning Xuema's gaze sweep over and puffed out his chest. No matter how incompetent he was, defeating a weak beauty was very easy, but when Shui Yilan's gaze swept over, he immediately became terrified. He knelt on the ground and didn't even dare to breathe. Chapter 1339. Ning Xuema yawned lazily, and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. She had no interest in this demon world emperor at all. She didn't want to walk the same path as Shui Yilan gave her such a big surprise without her consent. She would let him clean up this mess himself. She stretched again. She was sleepy again. These demons' impassioned words were nothing to her. She didn't listen to them at all and couldn't be bothered to pay attention to them. If it wasn't for Tang Yuan desperately dragging her here, she wouldn't have come. Seeing that Ning Xuema didn't move, Bloodthirsty thought that Ning Xuema was a piece of trash. He mocked her without holding back. "What? You can't beat this? Then, do you still deserve to be a demon emperor?" Ning Xuema glanced at him, her eyes as cold as snow. Bloodthirsty actually felt a murderous aura. However, this murderous aura disappeared in an instant, making him think that it was just his imagination. He continued to provoke Ning Xuema, but Ning Xuema didn't even look at him. She obviously treated him like a barking dog. On the other hand, Shui Yilan's eyes darkened, and his murderous aura became more and more obvious. He looked at Ning Xuema again, but Ning Xuema didn't even look at him. Her pretty face was expressionless, as if she didn't care. It was obvious that she thought he was meddlesome. Tang Yuan couldn't listen anymore. He ran in front of Bloodthirsty and pointed at his nose. Our Momo is very powerful. Who do you think you are to talk about her? Momo is as beautiful as a flower, her strength is off the charts, and her intelligence is outstanding. With a wave of her hand, she can sweep away millions of troops. You're ugly and stupid. Your skills are inferior, and your mouth is full of shit. Ning Xuema, Shuailan. Little Tang Yuan's last sentence seemed to rhyme quite well. Bloodthirsty slowly lifted his eyes, looking at the little kid who wasn't even as tall as him when he was kneeling. A vicious gleam flashed in his eyes. Little Rice Dumpling was shocked by the hostility in his eyes and instinctively wanted to take a step back, but it was too late. Bloodthirsty suddenly laughed. The special rope on his body was broken into many pieces. He jumped up and grabbed Tang Yuan in front of him. Tang Yuan screeched. Bloodthirsty's fingers had pierced into his back and lifted him up single-handedly. Demoness, if you voluntarily scram, obediently serve men, and no longer attempt to encroach on the Demon Emperor's position and release all of our brothers, I will let this brat go. If you don't agree, I will tear him apart. It turned out that the reason why Bloodthirsty had stalled for so long was to give him enough time to break his acupoints. Now that he had finally regained his freedom, he naturally wouldn't let go of any chance to escape. Shuailan had set up countless barriers around the meeting hall. Even if he regained his freedom, he wouldn't be able to escape by himself. He could only take a hostage first. Naturally, he wanted to capture Ning Xuema the most, but Shuailan was sitting next to her, vaguely looking like he was protecting her. With Bloodthirsty's abilities, he probably wouldn't be able to capture Ning Xuema. Instead, he would be sent flying by Shuailan's palm. Furthermore, this little demoness who looked like a pink dumpling wasn't very strong, and it seemed like that woman liked him a lot. More importantly, he was right next to him. He was a hostage that had delivered himself to his doorstep. He would take him first. He was a demon. Naturally, he wouldn't go easy on him just because he was a child. His 5 long nails pierced into Little Rice Dumpling's back, and blood instantly flowed down. Little Rice Dumpling's face instantly turned pale. He opened his mouth to cry, but he couldn't make a sound. Chapter 1340. Bloodthirsty's 5 fingers were like bayonets as he held Little Rice Ball. He was about to threaten him again when a long, red shadow suddenly shot toward him. Before he could react, he felt the weight in his hand lighten, and Little Glutinous Dumpling suddenly disappeared. He raised his head in shock and saw that Ning Xuemo was still sitting there. She had just retracted the red ribbon in her hand when Little Rice Ball was lying on her knees. His body was still trembling from the pain, and he could barely make a sound as he cried. Ning Xuema's 10 fingers tapped Little Rice Ball's back a few times, as if she was playing a pipa. Then, she took out some ointment from somewhere and applied it on his wounds. Her series of actions were like moving clouds and flowing water, without any pause. In the blink of an eye, Little Rice Ball's bleeding had been stopped, and he looked even more like a round rice ball. All the demons were speechless. Bloodthirsty was speechless. He had never thought that this seemingly weak woman would be able to snatch someone from his hands in one move. Furthermore, she had done it while he was on guard. How was that possible? Although he wasn't on guard against her, he was on guard against Shuailan, who was sitting next to her. This woman wasn't ordinary at all. Ning Xuema put Little Rice Ball down and slowly stood up. Then, she walked toward Bloodthirsty. At this moment, she was no longer as lazy as a sleeping beauty. Her eyes were dark, but there was a cold glint in the depths of her eyes. The invisible pressure around her shocked everyone present. Bloodthirsty was shocked by her aura and couldn't help but take a step back. However, he was also a ruthless person. Although he was shocked, he still managed to keep his composure. He raised his head and laughed. I didn't think that you would know some flowery moves. You're not just a coward. How about this? If you want to be the Spirit Demon King, and you want everyone to respect you, you have to show your true abilities and fight a few rounds with my brothers. If you win against my 4 brothers, We'll respect you and never rebel.
How about that?
He was still very scheming. Now that he had no hostages in his hands, with Shue Ilan's ability, he would be able to quickly subdue him. When that time came, he and his brothers would have no way to survive. What he said was a dignified challenge to Ning Xuema. As long as Ning Xuema accepted the challenge, no matter who won or lost, he and his brothers would have a chance to survive. Furthermore, he had acted like a man in front of all the devils. If he could regain some of his reputation, it could be considered as killing two birds with one stone. Ning Xuema walked until she was 2 meters away from him. She was clearly shorter than Bloodthirsty, but when she looked at him, it was as if she was looking down on him like a king. She slowly spat out 3 words, "I accept your challenge." Bloodthirsty's eyes lit up. "All right, then I'll send one of my brothers to warm up with your excellency. Shue 1, you go. Train our new emperor well." Shue 1 was the incompetent general just now. "Good. You let me go first. I'll compete in this round." Shue 1 clamored. Ning Xuema indifferently glanced at him and froze him there. Her eyes swept over the leaders of Bloodthirsty, and her lips curled up. Her voice was as indifferent as before, but the words she said were incomparably domineering. "No need. You 5, come together. If you can beat me, I'll let you do whatever you want." Shue Ilan looked at Ning Xuema, who had released her aura, and his eyes flashed with brilliance. His Momo was finally back. The group of devils looked at each other in dismay. This woman had such a big tone. She wasn't afraid of the wind twisting her tongue. Chapter 1341. If it weren't for Shue Ilan sitting above, the demons would have burst into laughter. Everyone inwardly mocked Ning Xuema for overestimating her capabilities. Bloodthirsty was the second most powerful person in the demon realm, second only to Shue Ilan. He was an Earth rank level 9, a very powerful existence. The reason why he was called Bloodthirsty was because he loved to kill. The number of people he had killed was countless, and his methods were even more cruel and terrifying. Ning Xuema was such a weak vase that she couldn't even stand a gust of wind. Who knew how she would be destroyed in his hands? What's more, the 4 brothers who rebelled with him this time were also very powerful. One was Earth rank level 8, one was Earth rank level 7, one was Earth rank level 6, and the weakest was Earth rank level 5. These 5 people were all extremely cruel devils. Their hands were stained with who knew how much blood they had. 2 of them were even magic weapons used by mothers to scare crying children. Any one of these 5 people was enough to make Ning Xuema drink a pot of water. She wanted to fight against 5 of them alone. Did she think that this was a game between children? Bloodthirsty couldn't help but laugh. "You have guts." He glanced at Shue Ilan, who was sitting next to him. "However, if you can't beat them, will you find help?" He was most afraid of Shue Ilan. "I won't," Ning Xuema answered succinctly. This girl's tone was so arrogant. Could it be that she really had some skills? Bloodthirsty's eyes were like hooks, sizing up Ning Xuema for a while. "If you lose, we can do whatever we want to you." "What if we lose? What do you need us to do?" Ning Xuema's voice was indifferent and cold. "I don't need you. So easy to talk to. Wise. I never need dead people to do anything." Bloodthirsty. In other words, Ning Xuema didn't plan to take them as her subordinates. If they lost, there was only one word: death. Bloodthirsty's eyes turned red. He took a deep breath and unsealed the acupuncture points of his 4 subordinates. Then, the 5 of them stood in 5 different directions. Bloodthirsty's voice was as cold as the winter. "If you've chosen this, then don't blame us for being impolite." They would beat this woman into a rag. Then, he threw it at Shue Ilan's face. The group of demons also became excited and automatically opened up a space for them to fight. Bloodthirsty was still worried. His eyes fell on Shue Ilan. What do you want to say? Do you have any objections?" He was still worried that Shue Ilan would go back on his word and help Ning Xuema. Shue Ilan's eyes darkened. He only said one sentence: "Since you're courting death, I have nothing to say." Hearing him, Bloodthirsty, and the others thought that Shui Ilan was talking about Ning Xuema. They couldn't help but look at each other. It seemed that their great monster king didn't love this woman as much as he loved her. Thus, Bloodthirsty and the others didn't have any more worries. The two sides finally started to fight. 20 moves. Only 20 moves. After 20 moves, Bloodthirsty fell heavily on the ground, stirring up a cloud of dust. He couldn't even say a word. He could only gasp like a broken bellows. Blood was spurting out from his acupuncture points. This was especially true for his back. His spine had been forcefully severed, and he lay there like a boneless fish, unable to get up again. The other 4 who had fallen before him weren't in a better situation. 2 of them were dead, and the other 2 were dying. They were struggling at death's door. Their lives were in danger. The demon warriors were stunned. Chapter 1342. There were many experts among these people, but none of them could see how Ning Xuema did it. Her movements were like a ghost, and her moves were clean and efficient. Moreover, her moves were ruthless, no less than any of the demons here. Her martial arts might not be as good as Shui Ilan's, but it was much better than anyone else's. Silence. It was so quiet that even the sound of a needle dropping could be heard. In this unprecedented silence, Ning Xuema's lips curled up. She looked down at Bloodthirsty, who was still breathing, as if she was looking at a lowly ant. She said indifferently, "You've lost. Do you want to blow yourself up, or do you want someone to send you on your way?" Bloodthirsty choked on his breath. He closed his eyes, knowing that he had no way to live. To die a more manly death, he chose to blow himself up. When he blew himself up, the blood mist splashed everywhere. Ning Xuema took a step back. She waved her hand, and a barrier appeared in front of her, blocking the blood mist. She didn't let a drop of dirty blood splash on her body. The other 2, who were still breathing, also chose to cut their own throats. At this point, the 5 leaders of the rebellion had all died in this battle. The entire hall was filled with the smell of blood. However, this was nothing to the demons who had been licking blood on their blades all year round. They liked to kill. They didn't have good or evil, and they didn't have friends. The only thing they respected and obeyed was the strong. Thunderous applause resounded. The demons clapped their hands as hard as they could. They hated that they couldn't clap their hands until they were swollen. Amazing, too amazing. She had only used 20 moves to destroy the 5 great guardians of the demon clan. Who could do this? The demon clan had another expert. There was hope for their revival. Ning Xuema's previous reaction had become deep and reserved in their eyes. She was calm and composed. Only an expert, no, a demon emperor, would have this kind of domineering aura. Who else could have this kind of domineering aura? Only her. Only her. She must be the demon emperor. The position of the demon emperor was hers. Ning Xuema stood there calmly. Her red robe fluttered, even though there was no wind. Her face was delicate, and her expression was cold. Her attacks were as fast as lightning, and she was very reserved. Wasn't this what little glutinous dumpling had said earlier? Our demon empress is as beautiful as a flower. Her martial prowess is off the charts, and her intelligence is outstanding. So, what he said was true. Little glutinous dumpling was also stunned. His mouth was so wide open that a pigeon egg could be stuffed in. After a while, he finally reacted and pounced forward. His eyes were filled with admiration. "Momo, you're so amazing. Too powerful." He suddenly knelt down and said solemnly, "Lord Demon Emperor will reign supreme for thousands of years." Little glutinous dumpling's words were like a signal. Countless people couldn't help but kneel down and prostrate themselves in worship towards Ning Xuema. Their shouts were like a mountain. "Lord Demon Emperor will reign supreme for thousands of generations. Lord Demon Emperor will reign supreme for thousands of generations." Waves of shouts rang out like the tide. With Ning Xuema as the center, all the devils kowtowed deeply. Ning Xuema stood among them, exuding the domineering aura of a ruler. Shui Ilan slowly walked down. Something seemed to be surging out of his eyes. He grasped her hand and knelt down on one knee. Momo, you were originally the devil ancestor. In this devil realm, you were originally the only one who reigned supreme. I, Shui Ilan, am willing to accompany you and protect you for all eternity. Ning Xuema lowered her eyes to look at him. She slowly pulled her hand away and said indifferently, I never said I wanted to be the demon emperor. Shui Ilan was clearly using this method to force her to return to her identity as Shui Emo. Moreover, he didn't even discuss it with her beforehand. Chapter 1343. Did he think that she was so easy to fool? She was her. She was Ning Xuema, not Shui Emo. He'd better remember this point. Ning Xuema didn't even look back as she turned around and left. Only one hall of demons remained, looking at each other in dismay. Then, everyone turned their attention to Shui Ilan. Shui Ilan's eyes darkened. After a while, he smiled. His Momo, compared to her previous life, had a lot more personality in this life. He liked it. He waved his hand, indicating for everyone to disperse. He stood in his original position, lost in thought for a moment, and then walked out with large strides. Ning Xuema went back to sleep. After resting for so many days, the injuries on her body had mostly healed. Perhaps it was because she had already cultivated to Earth rank level 9, but this time, even without Shun Juli's medicine, the injuries on her body healed very quickly. Now, her skin had already returned to its original delicate state. But what about her heart? Shui Ilan felt that he seemed to understand her less and less. Although she used to be expressionless in front of him, he was still able to observe the changes in her mood in the slightest way. But now, it was as if she was wearing a mask. He couldn't read the slightest bit of her inner thoughts from her face. For example, in order to make her agree to be the Demon Emperor, he deliberately let people address her as Demon Emperor Your Majesty in the places where she appeared and kneeled down to salute her. But she never had any reaction. She just walked past those people, as if she didn't hear them. Those demons were completely ignored. After a few times, those demons didn't dare to force her, and didn't dare to deliberately address her as Her Majesty. The sky was always dark, and the black fog was always floating. Although the palace of the Demon Palace was brightly colored, with golden tiles and red walls, it still gave off a decadent aura in the darkness. Why did you choose such a place to be the demon's habitat? One day, Ning Xuema asked this question while she was wandering. Such a gloomy tone, even if one was in a good mood, it would still be affected and bleak, okay? It made people want to go crazy. The demon chi here is dense. It's a suitable hotbed for demon cultivation. They were most comfortable here. In addition, the barrier formed by the devil chi was a bone-corroding poison to the cultivators. Without the power of Earth grade level 6 or above, they could not enter this place. Even if they came, their kung fu would be greatly reduced. It's a great barrier against them, Shui Ilan explained. Ning Xuema grunted and didn't say anything else. However, her heart sank slightly. After she came here, although she was disgusted by the gloomy atmosphere, she did not feel uncomfortable or uncomfortable. On the contrary, her martial arts had improved by leaps and bounds recently. She must be a devil now, right? It turned out that the devil world was her final destination. She had once longed for the light, but the light had never been fated with her. In the previous life, Shui Emo was the demon ancestor, and the original Ning Xuema was a secret agent who couldn't see the light of day. In this life, Ning Xuema was badly battered in the world of light, and in the end, she was beaten back into the darkness. It turned out that the darkness was her final destination. Momo, are you not feeling well? Shui Ilan grasped her hand and looked at her complexion. Her complexion had been pale.
No.
Ning Xuemo replied with 2 words, let's go. She didn't withdraw her hand. The 2 people walked side by side. Shui Ilan was somewhat gratified. These days, Ning Xuema had been very homebody, almost staying in the palace and not coming out. Chapter 1344. Occasionally, they would go out for a walk in the garden. It was rare for her to be in the mood to tour the entire demon realm, so he would naturally accompany her. The only thing that worried him was that Ning Xiaoma had made this request too suddenly, and he had casually agreed to it before coming out with her. They hadn't had time to clear the area. Slow down. I'm going to kill you. Just kill me. A series of ambiguous sounds came from the corner in front of them, and they could vaguely see 3 white bodies entangled there. This was the road to the main palace, but they didn't expect to see demons performing hot pa-pa-pa on the side of the road, and it was a 3P. Ning Xiaoma's footsteps paused, and Shui Ilan secretly clenched his fists. He reached out to grab Ning Xiaoma's hand and said, "Momo, let's go another way." Ning Xiaoma didn't say anything. She came out to relax, not to watch a 3P. Moreover, she was traumatized by the act of pa-pa-pa and didn't want to see it again. She turned around and went back with Shui Ilan. What she didn't expect was that the demons in the demon realm were so open, and she actually encountered a 10P on the way back. The 3P just now was a woman and 2 men, and now the 10P was 8 women and 2 men. The 8 women were kneeling in a circle, and the 2 men were surrounding them. The scene was so filthy that it made people want to poke their eyes out. Bastards. There were such scenes in front of and behind them, and Shui Ilan was furious. Couldn't they just take a stroll? Couldn't this group of bastards restrain themselves a little? If they wanted to have fun, they should have gone into the house. Why did they have to do it in the grass on both sides of the road? Get up, all of you! Shui Ilan shouted, successfully startling those wild mandarin ducks who were messing around. The few of them were unhappy that their fun was interrupted, but the one who came out to stop them was their demon emperor, so they naturally didn't dare to get angry. Fortunately, they put on their clothes very quickly, and after getting dressed, they all ran over to greet him. Shui Ilan felt that he had lost a lot of face. He only said one word, "Scram." Thus, the group of demons dispersed. Before they left, they gave Shui Ilan a puzzled look. They didn't understand why he was so angry today. Wasn't it just fun when everyone was bored? Didn't he usually not care? "Momo, let's go back. You take a rest first, I'll accompany you to walk around later." He had to clear the place properly. Ning Xiaoma's eyes were pitch black, making it impossible to see her emotions. She shook her head. "If you're tired, you can go back first. I'll stroll around a bit more." What she wanted to see was the original state of the demon world, not something that had been arranged by someone else. Shui Ilan didn't understand what she was thinking, but he couldn't leave her alone. Although he complained in his heart, he still decided to accompany her. "Momo, I'm afraid that you'll be tired. Okay, let's continue to walk around." The 2 of them walked forward again. In order to avoid the previous embarrassment, Shui Ilan deliberately slowed down a step. Then he took out a pure black voice-transmitting talisman and was about to call one of his confidants over to ask him to send someone to clear the place in front. Ning Xiaoma suddenly appeared beside him and asked, "What are you doing?" Shui Ilan was shocked. Ning Xiaoma came and went so suddenly that he didn't even notice that she was beside him. Ning Xiaoma raised her hand and took away the voice-transmitting talisman that he had just connected. She casually cut off the call and said lightly, "You don't have to be so deliberate." Then she walked forward. It seemed that she wanted to see the real devil world. Shui Ilan felt a headache coming on. Chapter 1345. Before Shui Emo met Shui Ilan in her previous life, she was almost always sealed away by the demon ancestor in a special place in the demon palace to cultivate. She rarely saw the real scenery of the demon world. Later, when she became the successor of the demon ancestor, she had more time to cultivate and less time to play. In order to create a sense of mystery, the demon ancestor almost didn't let her have too much contact with the other demons. Later, when Shui Ilan came to her side, he took care of everything for her. He cleared away those messy things early on and didn't let her see them at all. Therefore, although Shui Emo grew up in the demon world, she still didn't know much about the real demon world. But in this life, Ning Xiaoma's memories of her previous life had been artificially modified by Shui Ilan. Many things were removed, added, and deleted. They were no longer the original memories of Shui Emo. The demons of the demon world had always been so casual. They had all kinds of ways to find fun. Many of them were unimaginable, but they were also where their fun lay. After he rebuilt the demon world, he gathered the demons with great difficulty. Naturally, he couldn't forbid them from having fun. Occasionally, in order to make them do things to their heart's content, he even used this as a reward. He subconsciously didn't want Ning Xuema to see these dark things, but now they were directly presented in front of her eyes. What would her reaction be after seeing these? Shui Ilan was apprehensive. He felt that this walk was the most stressful one he had ever walked. Demons acted without restraint. Along the way, the two scared away a few pairs of wild lovebirds. They even saw a pair of abusers. The one being abused was a human girl, and the one abusing her was a demon general. When they saw it, the human girl's whole body was already so bruised that it was impossible to see. She only had one last breath left. After the demon general saw Shui Ilan and Shui Ilan, he didn't feel ashamed. He casually slapped the human girl to death, put on his robe, and saluted the two. He probably hadn't obtained true satisfaction. After saluting, his eyes couldn't help but stare at Ning Xuema. The undisguised lust in his eyes could not be concealed. Shui Ilan was infuriated. Just as he was about to teach this demon general a lesson, Ning Xuema beside him suddenly flashed. Ah! A miserable shriek tore through the night sky. The demon general's eyes were pierced by a sharp object. Blood flowed out, and he was in so much pain that he almost rolled on the ground. Ning Xuema casually threw away the branch in her hand and said indifferently, "I don't think you should live in this world anymore." She didn't even look at the blind devil general and continued to walk forward. The devil general did not expect to receive such a cruel punishment. In his shock and anger, he forgot about his seniority. He raised his hand, and a large rock on the ground flew into his hand. He then waved it forcefully. "What are you pretending to be serious about?" His kung fu was pretty good. Even if he was blind, he could still determine Ning Xuema's location. The huge rock whizzed towards Ning Xuema. Shui Ilan's expression changed. With a wave of his sleeve, the huge rock suddenly turned around and slammed into the demon general's face. This time, not only did the demon general lose his eyes, his entire face was gone as well. He became a pile of meat paste on the spot. Not far away, the other demon generals who had just rushed over could not help but be stunned. 7 or 8 pairs of eyes looked at Shui Ilan. Shui Ilan's voice was as cold as ice. "If anyone dares to disrespect Miss Ning again, they will end up like this person." All the demon generals. Chapter 1346. Originally, it was just a stroll to relieve boredom, but because of this small episode, it became somewhat heavy. Ning Xuema continued to move forward, but she was even more silent. Shui Ilan was also somewhat dispirited. He was afraid that Ning Xuema would see something even more unbearable, so he suggested to go back. This time, Ning Xuema did not object. The two people had just turned around when they heard the faint cry of a child in front of them. The cry was mournful and startling. "Mother, I want to find Mother." Wuwa. Ning Xuema's body stiffened. This child's cry was quite similar to Hong Ti's. Her figure rose and flew forward. Shui Ilan was unable to hold her back. His expression changed, and he could only follow. 8 devil generals were currently sitting around 2 large tables, drinking wine and eating meat. Their wine was actually normal wine, but the dishes... After Ning Xuema saw the dishes clearly, her stomach immediately churned. Hearts. Still beating hearts, steamed beauties, and several white and chubby children were lying dead on the side. The most shocking thing was the dish in the middle of the table. A child's head was shaved and imprisoned in the round hole in the middle of the table, twitching. His skull was already delicious. "It's really too delicious." All the devils praised. After eating 2 mouthfuls, they seemed to feel that the atmosphere was not right. They suddenly turned around and saw Shui Ilan and Shui Ilan standing not far away. After staring blankly for a moment, they immediately stepped forward and saluted. One of the devil generals invited Shui Ilan, "Your Majesty, Demon Emperor. Do you want to taste this?" The goods we got this time are very good. The taste is also better than last time. Shui Yilan simply wanted to cover the devil general's mouth. He could not help but look at Ning Xuema beside him. Ning Xuema's face was deathly pale. She tightly pursed her lips and did not say anything. She just fiercely waved her sleeve, and a sharp wind directly attacked the dying child, giving him a release. All the demon generals were stunned, and one of them was more dazed. We can't kill him. It's better to eat him alive. Shut up. Shui Yilan shouted, successfully making the devil general choke. Ning Xuema had already turned around and left quickly, leaving behind Shui Yilan, who had lost his composure. A moment later, he hurriedly followed. Momo, they've suffered countless losses from humans, so they're venting their anger on humans. Think about it. Don't humans treat other species the same way? I'll eat the monkey's brain alive, cook the duck's feet alive, pour the donkey's meat alive. They had already returned to Ning Xuema's sleeping quarters. Shui Yilan saw that Ning Xuema's face was too pale, so he couldn't help but share this knowledge with her.
Get out.
Let me be alone. Ning Xuema spoke more this time, but it was to drive him away. Shui Yilan's expression darkened, and he sighed. Momo, don't worry, I won't let you see this again in the future. He would clear the places she would pass in advance. Ning Xuema's response was to slam the door shut. The door almost hit Shui Yilan's nose. Ning Xuema slowly sat down on the chair and closed her eyes slightly. Although she was betrayed by Xinju, hated him to the bone, and even had thoughts of becoming a demon, she had been living for many years. A human's thinking was deeply ingrained, and it wasn't so easy to destroy. Her concept of good and evil was still there, but after seeing the life of a real demon, she had a feeling that her three views were about to collapse. She closed the door in the hall and thought for a night. The next day, she finally opened the door. Shui Yilan, who had been anxious for a night, was guarding outside the door. When he saw her open the door, he immediately stepped forward. Momo. Chapter 1347. Ning Xuema's eyes were dark, and the expression on her face was cold as if she had let go of something. Shui Yilan, do you really want me to stay in the demon world? Do you really want me to be the demon emperor? Shui Yilan was stunned, but he nodded without hesitation. That's right. Momo, you're the demon ancestor, and the demon world is your home base. Shui Yilan, I don't care what Shui Emo was like in the previous life, but in this life, I'm Ning Xuema, not anyone else. You better remember this. Ning Xuema's eyes shone like cold stars.
Okay.
Shui Yilan agreed. I don't care how Shui Emo stayed in the demon world in the previous life, but I have my own set of rules. If I want to be the demon emperor, I have to change some of the rules of the demon world. Ning Xuema put forward her own conditions. Shui Yilan's heart jumped. Since he rebuilt the demon world, all the rules were the same as before, and he never thought of changing them. He built the demon world for Shui Emo's return, so if she wants to change them, then change them. She had been lifeless for so long, and it was rare to see her pull herself together again. Okay. Shui Yilan simply replied with a word. Ning Xuema's gaze turned to Shui Yilan, and her eyes were slightly complicated. Shui Yilan was really good to her, regardless of the cost. He knew that her reform would probably be a big change of blood for the demon world, and the pressure he would have to bear would be very, very big. Shui Yilan was extremely intelligent, and he should have understood this point long ago. However, he still said okay without hesitation, as long as she nodded, whether it was climbing a mountain of blades or diving into a sea of fire, he could charge in without frowning. On the heavenly sound peak, the setting sun melted the gold, and the rosy clouds burned continuously. Another day had passed. Yelu Jing and stood on the peak, anxiously looking at the snow-white pagoda floating in the sea of clouds. How long will Master be in seclusion? Does he know that the outside world has already undergone earth-shaking changes? There are many urgent matters that need to be reported to him. Yelu Jing and didn't know what happened between Xinju and Ning Xuema. He only knew that the atmosphere between his junior sister and master was a bit strange, because he, as a junior, couldn't casually ask about his master's affairs, so he didn't ask about things he shouldn't know. 16 days ago, the little Qilin brought a fire phoenix to seek shelter in a hurry, as if there was a ghost chasing after it. Masters, mastermiss. Masters, and although the little s, the little devils is, its little s's didn't kill little to s to him. After all, masters is, and a use her masters you master, Yalu Jing, and also knew that Kirin was very favored and could freely enter and leave Heavenly Sound Peak, so he first asked for his master's permission. Shinjuli only said one word, permitted. Thus, he sent the two up, and they didn't come down again. He didn't know if they'd seen his junior sister or not. After that, Shinjuli transmitted a message to him, telling him not to let anyone step into Heavenly Sound Peak for 3 days. He also ordered him to prepare the festive wedding items. He only had 3 words for these items, the best. He didn't know what his master was planning, but he still prepared everything according to his master's orders. He was just waiting for his master's order to decorate the wedding hall. Chapter 1348. However, he hadn't expected that 3 days later, Shinjuli would enter seclusion, and his junior sister's whereabouts were still unknown. While he was confused, a disciple at the foot of the mountain who had been paying attention to the demon world sent a shocking piece of news. His junior sister, Ning Xuema, had gone to the demon world and was now with Xue Ilan, Yalu Jing, and was the kind of person who wouldn't change his expression even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him. He had experienced many storms in his life, but this news still shocked him and made him unable to recover for a long time. As he sent people to continue investigating the demon world, he used the special voice transmission talisman to contact his master. However, Shinjuli didn't seem to have any intention of picking up. He tried for 3 days, but there was still no news from his master. Yalu Jing steeled his heart and went up the mountain to take a look. He arrived outside the White Tower, where Shinjuli was cultivating in seclusion, but he didn't dare to disturb him. This was because Shinjuli had previously instructed that no one was allowed to disturb him when he was cultivating in seclusion in the White Tower unless he took the initiative to contact someone. While Yalu Jing was pacing around outside, a woman's clothes fluttered up not far away. It was Fairy Yunxi, who had been visiting the Sun Moon sect frequently recently. Fairy Yunxi's expression was somewhat solemn. After hearing about Shinjuli's situation from Yalu Jing, she took a deep breath and said loudly to the White Tower, "Dizun, Yunxi has an important matter to discuss with you." She shouted 3 times in a row, and the White Tower's doors finally opened slowly on both sides. Shinjuli walked out slowly, stepping on the sea of clouds in the void and arriving at the mountain peak. He didn't wear a mask this time, but there wasn't much expression on his face. Yalu Jing vaguely felt that his master's aura seemed to have become much colder. He hurriedly went forward to greet him. Shinjuli only nodded slightly at him, indicating for him to stand up. Then he glanced at Yunxi. "What's the matter?" Yunxi glanced at Yalu Jing. Yalu Jing was a tactful person, so he immediately tried to think of a way to avoid this. Unexpectedly, before he could say anything, Shinjuli said, "There's no harm in speaking." The meaning was naturally that Yalu Jing was not allowed to evade. Therefore, Yalu Jing stayed put and acted as a third wheel. There was a flash of sadness in Yunxi's eyes. However, she was here to bring some breaking news to Shinjuli, so she didn't care about the details. She took a deep breath and finally revealed the explosive news. Dizun, Yunxi just found out that the demon realm has a new demon monarch. It is said that it is Lady Ning. After she finished speaking, she couldn't help but stare at Shinjuli, expecting to see shock and anger on his face. However, she was finally disappointed. Shinjuli's eyes only darkened slightly, but his face was still as calm as water. He replied her with a single word, "Oh." Yunxi was speechless. She felt as if she had used all her strength to throw a punch, yet she had ended up punching a ball of clouds. This wasn't an ordinary feeling of emptiness. She opened her mouth, as if she wanted to say something, but she couldn't find the words. Is there anything else? Julie's voice was as calm as water. No, nothing else. Oh, that's right. Dizun, my injuries have completely healed. She fluttered in a circle. Julie nodded slightly, indicating that he understood. Then, he said something that made Yunxi's pretty face turn pale. Since there's nothing else, you can leave. Jing and see the guest out. Chapter 1349. Yunxi was speechless. She coughed and turned to ask Yelu Jing and casually, Jingnan, what's going on with your junior sister? Why is she associating with demons? Yelu Jing and smiled and bowed. Jing and doesn't know. Fairy, please. Yunxi choked. She'd originally wanted to get some information out of Yelu Jing, but she hadn't expected her to be so tight-lipped. She asked a few more questions, and Yelu Jing and answered politely. However, every word was just a formality, and she didn't reveal any gossip. Yunxi had no choice but to leave. She just turned around when Yelu Jing and suddenly thought of something. Oh right, I forgot something. Some of your things are still with me. I'm returning them now. Fairy, please check and see if you've missed anything. My master said that there can't be the slightest oversight. He took out some miscellaneous items from his storage bag. They were all things Yunxi had used when she was recuperating, such as an ivory comb, a water chestnut mirror, a powder box, a crystal hairpin. Yunxi's face turned green and white. She forced a smile, put away those things, and turned around to leave. Yelu Jing bowed and sent her off. Her etiquette was extremely thorough, but her eyes flashed with disdain as she watched her leave. It was said that this fairy had been seriously injured while helping her master retrieve something. Her master had made an exception and allowed her to stay at Tianyin Peak. He'd even built a small building for her and instructed Yelu Jing and to send 2 female disciples to take care of her daily needs. When her master was at the peak, this fairy looked so weak that she could faint at any moment. When her master wasn't at the peak, she liked to wander around. She'd even gone to the side hall where her junior sister lived and bought a bed of the same style. Later, her master had healed her arm and ordered her to leave. She'd left, but she'd left behind a pile of things in that small building. She hadn't taken any of her daily necessities with her. It was obvious that she wanted to come back and live there again. Her feelings for her master were clearly displayed on her face, so Yelu Jing and couldn't ignore it. A few days ago, when Julie had Yelu Jing and prepare the wedding items, Yelu Jing and was still muttering in her heart, thinking that her master, this 1,000-year-old iron tree, was finally going to bloom, but she didn't know who he wanted to marry. She thought about all the women her master knew who were slightly closer to her and thought that Fairy Yunxi had finally been chosen. Looking at it now, that was obviously not the case. Then who did master prepare it for? Could it be, it was little junior sister? Yelu Jing and slapped this thought back to her mind and turned to go to the main hall where her master lived. What do you have to report?
Just say it.
This was the first thing Julie said when he saw Yelu Jing and didn't dare to be long-winded, only reporting everything one by one. For example, there had been strange movements in the Devil Realm recently. People often went missing in several cities near the Devil Realm, and most of them were children. The Sun Moon sect and a few other sects had joined forces to set up surveillance in those cities and caught 2 demons. From them, they learned that the Devil Realm and the Demon Realm had joined forces, and their master was the Demon Emperor. The Demon Emperor turned out to be Shui Ilan, and there seemed to be some changes recently. He was going to give up his position to a woman by his side, and that woman's name was Ning Xiuma. Yelu Jing and secretly checked her master's expression as she reported. Julie's eyelashes were lowered, and no expression could be seen. He only said, "Continue." Chapter 1350. Yelu Jing and clenched her teeth. The other sects are furious, and there are already several sect masters who have sent people to the Sun Moon sect to demand an explanation. Master, is that girl really Junior Sister? So what if she is, and so what if she isn't? Shun Julie's tone was cold. Yalu Jing and was moved. Is she really Junior Sister? Junior Sister is definitely not a demon. If she went to the demon world, did Master send her to be a spy? Shun Julie didn't answer and slowly got up. Pass down my verbal order. Ning Xuema is no longer my disciple. From today onwards, I will sever my master-disciple relationship with her. Yalu Jing and turned pale with fright and knelt down. Master, you want to expel her from the sect? Shun Julie asked back. Did I say I would expel her from the sect? Yalu Jing and seemed to have fallen into a fog. Then Master's meaning is? It's the literal meaning, go. Shun Julie ordered her to leave. Yalu Jing and could only bid farewell and leave, walking while comprehending the venerable emperor's spirit. After thinking for a while, she suddenly understood. Master's meaning was that Ning Xuema was no longer the venerable emperor's disciple, but she was still a disciple of the Sun Moon sect. It seemed that Junior Sister was indeed a spy sent by Master to the demon world, but it was inconvenient for Master to say it. However, Master's verbal order had to be spread throughout the world, or else it would be very unsafe for Junior Sister to be a spy there, and it would be easy for her to be criticized by the people of the demon world. Once this verbal order was spread, Junior Sister's position in the demon world would be stable. But the other sects wouldn't let her go, and when the time came, there would be a rain of blood. It seemed that he still had to make arrangements to secretly send people to protect Junior Sister's safety and not let others bully her. Otherwise, he, Yalu Jing, would lose face. How should this verbal order be passed down so that the other sects wouldn't dare to act rashly? Yalu Jing understood the venerable emperor's spirit and began to ponder the most important question. As expected of someone who had led the Sun Moon sect for many years, he wasn't an ordinary deep-fried dough stick. After thinking for a long time, he finally thought of something. His eyes lit up, and he hurriedly went down to pass on the ancestors' instructions. Shun Julie stayed in the side chamber where Ning Xuema was for a full 6 hours. After 6 hours, he came out and summoned Yili Jing again. He said faintly, "Clean up this side chamber. Don't leave anything behind." He turned and left. Yalu Jing stared blankly. The ancestor's order was the same as what he'd said to Yunqi back then. Clean up everything in the building. Now that Yunqi's small building had been demolished by the ancestor, could this side hall be demolished as well? In that case, where would Junior Martial Sister Xuema stay after she returned? Yalu Jing walked around the side chamber and found that the things here were truly lacking. She couldn't help but sigh. When Ning Xuema went missing for 10 years, everyone thought that she had been completely killed. They were afraid that their master would think of her when he returned, so they followed Wu Mo's instructions and cleaned up everything that belonged to Ning Xuema. Later, when Ning Xuema returned, because she came and went in a hurry, she didn't leave many things in this side chamber. There were only toiletries, a few sets of clothes, a few beaded flowers, and a few pieces of jewelry. Now, all these things were left alone, giving people a sense of desolation for no reason. Yalu Jing tidied up all these things and placed them in a suitable place. He was prepared to return them to Ning Xuema when she returned victorious. In order to eliminate the wariness of the Devil Realm's demons towards Junior Martial Sister, Master really put in a lot of effort. However, what would Junior Martial Sister's reaction be when she heard that Master had severed their master-disciple relationship? Chapter 1351. In order to eliminate the demon's wariness towards Junior Sister, Master really put in a lot of effort, he understood. Thus, Yalu Jing added an extra clause to the original order, hoping to achieve the best result. Suddenly, an explosive piece of news spread in the not-so-peaceful Jianghu. Because Ning Xuema was willing to degenerate into a demon, the ancestor personally gave a verbal order to sever his master-disciple relationship with his disciple, Ning Xuema. From now on, he would no longer recognize her as his disciple. He also wanted to personally clean up the sect, and no other sect was allowed to interfere. Ning Xuema's residence, Snow Frost Hall, was also to be demolished and used for other purposes. The ancestors' every move was like a wind vane on this continent. Even if he sneezed, the people of this continent would analyze it with relish for a month, let alone when he gave such an order. Immediately, the pot exploded. This news was like sitting on a rocket, quickly spreading to every corner of the continent. Even the furthest rabbits heard about it. Not to mention the other sects that had been paying attention to the Sun-Moon sex movements. The leaders of these sects were originally discussing how to get rid of the demons and protect the righteous path. They were discussing how to jointly write a petition to the ancestor for the sake of righteousness and justice. They didn't expect to hear this news. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, praising the ancestor in their hearts. As expected of the ancestor, he was both courageous and responsible. He didn't protect his own, and was willing to put righteousness before righteousness to get rid of evil for the people. However, because of the ancestor's verbal order, those righteous sects that were preparing to assassinate Ning Xuema didn't dare to act rashly. If the ancestor wanted to clean up the sect himself, who would dare to interfere? It wasn't like they didn't want to live anymore. Thus, some of the assassination attempts against Ning Xuema were silently stopped before they could even begin. The Jianghu, which had been surging with undercurrents, once again regained its calm. The demon realm, which had been eyeing the Sun-Moon sect covetously, naturally also heard this news. Of course, it also quickly reached Ning Xuema's ears. When Ning Xuema first heard this news, it was at dusk in the afternoon. She and Xue Ilan were taking a walk in the garden. She inadvertently heard the two demonesses talking about this gossip. I heard that the sovereign of the Sun-Moon sect has ordered Lady Ning to be expelled from the sect. I heard about it too. It is said that the ancestor is going to personally hunt her down and destroy the side palace she used to live in. It seems like the ancestor is serious this time. Of course it's true. Have you heard that Dizun once accepted a female disciple called Yi Qingwan? Later, for some unknown reason, she was expelled from the sect. It seems that the ancestor still gives Yi Qingwan face. At the very least, he didn't hunt her down and let her live a comfortable life. He also turns a blind eye to some of her actions. But he doesn't give Miss Ning any face at all. It should be because Miss Ning wants to join our demon and devil realms, right? Although the venerable sovereign usually doesn't care about the affairs of the three realms, he is still an immortal after all. He still has his bottom line. Don't you think it's strange? The ancestor only accepted 2 female disciples. I didn't expect that both of them would be expelled one after the other. It seems that the ancestor was destined not to have female disciples. It's just that the ancestor is too powerful and too dazzling. Any woman would like him. And his 2 female disciples are as beautiful as flowers and jade. It's inevitable that they would have some thoughts about their master, and the ancestor wouldn't do such a dirty thing. Naturally, they were expelled from the sect. Chapter 1352. What you said is wrong. Yi Qingwan was expelled because she had dirty thoughts about Dizun. It's not like that on our side. She entered the devil realm because she liked our demon emperor. That's why she was expelled by the ancestor. Oh right, I heard that Dizun actually treated her very special and made many exceptions for her. Could it be that Dizun really likes her? Impossible. Dizun has never liked women. What's that saying? Everything is empty. Yes, everything is empty. Some things are hard to say. Alas, this woman is really a disaster. Not only did she hook up with our demon king, but she also has an unclear relationship with Dizun. I'm afraid that Dizun will harm our demon world because of this. That would be troublesome. Yes, a woman who looks like a flower vase is sitting on our demon king's seat. She only relies on her good skills in bed to make our Lord Xue fall head over heels for her. Haha, maybe she and her master also have such an affair. These 2 witches were the daughters of the demon race's ministers. They were sent to the demon palace by their father with the intention of giving them to Xue Ilan as concubines. Xue Ilan didn't accept them, so these 2 witches shamelessly stayed in the palace and worked as maids. They tried every possible means to win Shui Yilan's attention. Shui Yilan's thoughts were all on Ning Xuema, which made them feel uncomfortable. They had already made up a lot of bad things about Ning Xuema in their hearts. Now that they got such a piece of gossip, they were naturally very excited. They casually found a big stone in this big garden and thought that it was quite secretive, so they began to gossip. Not a single word left out was heard by Shui Yilan and Ning Xuema who were passing by nearby. When Shui Yilan heard the first sentence, he frowned and opened his mouth to stop them. Unexpectedly, Ning Xuema waved her hand, indicating that he shouldn't be alarmed. She lifted her skirt and leisurely sat on a big stone nearby to listen. Shui Yilan had no choice but to let her be and sat beside her. In fact, Shui Yilan had long heard rumors about Xin Jiuli and Ning Xuema severing their master-disciple relationship. He was afraid that Ning Xuema would be upset, so he didn't dare to tell her he had been thinking about how to tell her tactfully. Now, these two witches could be considered to have helped him. He had been paying attention to Ning Xuema's reaction, but Ning Xuema had been listening with a smile on her face. She had been twirling a red spider lily in her hand, and her face had been very calm. This news didn't seem to have affected her too much. He didn't know if she had really let go or if she was just pretending to be strong. When he heard the words Ning Xuema likes our demon emperor, Shui Yilan's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't help but look at Ning Xuema again. Ning Xuema's lips twitched again, but she still didn't show any expression. After the two witches finished gossiping, they came out with satisfaction. When they raised their heads, they suddenly saw the two people who were sitting on a big rock. They were shocked and looked at each other. Their faces turned red, and they pursed their lips. Then, they knelt down. Your Majesty the Demon Emperor, Shui Yilan's handsome face turned cold. Gossiping about your master behind his back is a crime punishable by death. After he finished speaking, he glanced at Ning Xuema. He knew that she didn't kill people easily. With her personality, these two witches gossiped about their master. She would probably just reprimand them. However, Ning Xuema looked at the two witches with a smile. She didn't have any intention to interrupt. The two witches thought that their father was more favored in front of Shui Yilan, so they weren't afraid at this time. They even thought that this was an opportunity to attract Shui Yilan's attention, so they immediately apologized to him coquettishly. Their voices were sweet, and their eyes were watery. Chapter 1353. Shui Yilan simply wanted to slap these two to death. He glanced at Ning Xuema. Ning Xuema looked at him with a slight smile, as if she was watching a show, as if she wanted to see what he was going to do. Shui Yilan's heart sank. Although Ning Xuema promised him to be the Demon Emperor and proposed some reform plans, because her prestige was not high, she could not completely implement them. Every time he gave an order, they would only be willing to do it. He paused for a moment, then continued to reprimand, but his words revealed that he would only spare them if Ning Xuema agreed. Fortunately, one of the two witches was a little smarter and finally remembered to beg Ning Xuema. Because she was angry, this apology was not sincere at all and looked forced. Ning Xuema was still sitting there, holding her chin with her hand and smiling gently. You guys are very happy gossiping about me. Shui Yilan, I seem to be the king of the demon world now, but it seems that they don't take me seriously. Shui Yilan originally had the idea of killing these two witches, but after hearing Ning Xuema's words, he immediately understood. He smiled slightly. Momo, it's my negligence. I will let them remember who their king is. He flicked his finger, and the two witches were tied up there. Then, he ordered people to ring the assembly bell in the demon race's conference hall. All the titled demon subjects were divided into two sides. Two demon generals were kneeling there, and kneeling beside them were their daughters, the two talkative witches. Ning Xuema sat on the demon head seat this time, and Shui Yilan sat on the seat slightly below her. Those two demon generals were very capable, and they were very loyal to Shui Yilan. They had contributed a lot to Shui Yilan's success in stabilizing his position as the demon emperor. It was just that they were too unrestrained in their work. Relying on the fact that Shui Yilan usually treated them with special respect, they didn't put anyone in their eyes. This time, their daughter had gotten into trouble, but they didn't take it to heart. After Shui Ilan coldly ordered the two witches to confess their crimes, they went to Ning Xuema and said that they were just children who didn't know anything and spoke nonsense. They asked Her Majesty, the Demon Emperor, to be magnanimous and not take it to heart. These kinds of words were meant to downplay this matter and let it pass. The other demon general was even more straightforward as he finally said, "The two of you, quickly kowtow and apologize to Lord Demon Emperor. Lord Demon Emperor is magnanimous and won't bicker with you." As expected, the two women unwillingly kowtowed to Ning Xuema. Ning Xuema raised her hand, and the two women were stopped by an invisible force. She smiled faintly and finally said, "Without rules, nothing can be accomplished." I wonder, according to the law of the demon realm, what is the punishment for a subject openly discussing the rights and wrongs of an emperor? When she said this, everyone's heart skipped a beat. In fact, the laws of the demon realm were very strict. If these two women used such words to discuss Shui Ilan, they would be sentenced to having their tongues cut out and then thrown into the demon realm's Heishui River to be burned to death. The two demon generals probably didn't expect that although Ning Xuema had become the demon emperor, she didn't care about anything in the past few days, would actually ask such a question. Their expressions changed slightly. They couldn't help but raise their heads and see Ning Xuema sitting there. Although there was a faint smile on her charming face, the bottom of her eyes was cold. She clearly didn't do anything, but the aura around her was even stronger than Shui Ilan's. That oppressive aura made the two experienced demon generals anxious. Their faces turned green and white, and they didn't dare to answer. Chapter 1354. Shui Ilan rubbed his chin as a hint of relief flashed through his eyes. Even in his previous life, his Momo did not have such a strong aura. It seemed that after being dispirited for so long, she was finally going to recover. Her Majesty the Demon King is asking you a question. Are you afraid or disdainful to answer? Shui Ilan asked as he stared at the two of them. The smile on his face had also turned cold. The two demons were also old foxes who had been in the Jianghu for a long time. Now that things had developed to this point, the two of them understood that the new Demon King was using them as bait to establish her might. These two witches were blind and had bumped into the muzzle of the gun. At this point, they could no longer protect their daughter. Otherwise, they would be implicated and punished as well. The two demons did not have a deep relationship with their daughter to begin with. At this time, they naturally chose to abandon the rook to protect the king. They immediately bowed respectfully to Ning Xuema. "Your Majesty, it is our fault for not teaching our daughter properly and offending your Majesty's might. We will act according to the laws of the demon race and punish the two of them severely." The two witches who were still unconcerned and rolled their eyes at Ning Xuema earlier were dragged away. When they were dragged away, they wailed like ghosts and howled like wolves. They desperately begged in the direction where Ning Xuema was sitting. This time, they were sincere and did not add any lies. Unfortunately, it was already too late. This small episode passed just like that. This show of killing the chicken to scare the monkey finally made the demons understand who was the real master of the demon realm. They also understood that this delicate-looking little girl was not to be trifled with. Once they offended her, even the heavenly king would be punished. Thus, the demons became much more obedient. They were more respectful towards Ning Xuema and no longer treated her as a dispensable puppet. Ning Xuema was also strange. She still did things her own way. Although she was the demon king, she was still like before. Every day, she spent more time cultivating and less time coming out. Over time, the demons in the demon realm also knew a rule. This demon king did not like to care about the matters of the demon realm. Usually, as long as they did not provoke her, they could still live their lives peacefully. The one who was truly in charge was still Shui Ilan. Thus, the Devil Assembly regained their joy. Although the demon realm was rich in demon chi, it was extremely scarce in resources. Therefore, the demons basically had to go out and steal for food and clothing. They were particular about the principle of taking things. Killing and arson were easier and more common than eating cabbage. This naturally attracted the pursuit of human cultivators. Because the Devil Realm was in decline now, the Devil Realm was often chased by the other party when they were outside. There were many people who lost their lives for a nice robe or a jar of good wine. Although the demonic world was called the demonic world, the demonic world was still rather miserable. The demons lived a life where there was no tomorrow, so they muddled along. Generally, they held the attitude that if there was wine today, they would drink in the morning, and if there was no wine tomorrow, they would be worn out. It was completely different from the demons of the past. After Ning Xuema ascended to the position of the Demon King, although she did not care much, she occasionally issued orders to reform some of the demons' shortcomings. At first, the demons could not accept it, but later on they found that once it was implemented, there were actually many benefits. For example, the Devil Realm was rich in a kind of obsidian. This kind of stone could be sold for a lot of money in the human realm. However, the demons guarded this treasure mountain but could not sell it. Because most of the demons had demon chi, they were easily recognized by human cultivators. If they sold this kind of thing from the Devil Realm, it was simply a living signboard. Before a stone could be sold, it would attract the pursuit of human cultivators. Chapter 1355. The cultivators in the human world did not dare to come to the demon realm to pick up this kind of stone. This was the territory of the demons. If they came in, they would only be eaten alive by the demons. However, Ning Xuema came up with an idea. She ordered dozens of honest villagers to enter the demon realm to dig up this kind of stone. The premise was that they had to bring enough daily necessities to exchange when they came in. When the first batch of villagers carried a load full of daily necessities into the demon realm, the demons were practically drooling on both sides of the road. They were used to eating humans. When they saw these people come in voluntarily, it was like seeing fat sheep walking in front of them. Because of Ning Xuema's strict order, the demons did not dare to act recklessly. Seeing that the daily necessities did not have to be snatched this time and came automatically, they still endured it. The price set by Ning Xuema was very fair. After these villagers brought the corresponding amount of obsidian out and sold it, they would definitely make a profit. After these villagers risked their lives to come in, they found that this was a lucrative job. Later on, they did not need to be invited and came on their own. Because the villagers went out to sell the obsidian. Even if the cultivators saw them, they could not do anything to these villagers. Therefore, the obsidian was successfully sold, and the daily necessities sent into the demon realm naturally became more and more abundant. Ning Xuema divided these demons. Some were mining, some were inspecting the stones, some were checking the quality of daily necessities, and some were receiving goods. Gradually, a one-stop service was formed. Of course, the daily necessities obtained were still distributed according to the work they did.
This was just a rough way of saying it.
There was still a very detailed division of labor. It would not be described here one by one, or it would become a farming story. In short, after a series of reforms by Ning Xuema, the demons found that they no longer had to be hunted down by human cultivators to snatch a bone. They relied on this obsidian mountain to be self-sufficient. The probability of being hunted down was greatly reduced. Ning Xuema's management system was very refreshing for the demons, and they did get a lot of benefits. Therefore, unknowingly, their previous rejection of Ning Xuema changed to acceptance. They were also willing to implement the rules that she had promulgated. 2 months. In just 2 months, the atmosphere in the demon realm changed greatly. People died for wealth, and birds died for food. When the basic necessities of life were well taken care of, even the demons were too lazy to go out and do evil. It was not like they had nothing better to do. What's the latest news? Shun Juli was sitting under a big tree with fiery red leaves, drawing with his brush. The maple leaves in the painting were like fire, depicting the current scenery. Opposite him, Yalu Jing and reported to him, "Junior sister's method is very good. It made those devils behave a lot. Recently, the devil realm has been very peaceful. The devils don't come out to do as much evil." Shun Juli gently turned a chess piece on his fingertips and nodded slightly. "What about the other sex? Yes, the Devil Realm is so peaceful that other sects don't know what they're doing, so they try to pretend to be ordinary villagers and sneak in to take a look. However, the number of villagers who can enter the Devil Realm is fixed, and the devils inside have their own ways to identify them. Those sect elders who know how to disguise themselves as one of them were recognized at the entrance. If he didn't run fast enough, he would have been eaten alive by the devils. Not only that, the villager he disguised as was permanently disqualified from entering the Devil Realm. The other villagers are afraid that if another disciple of a cultivation sect impersonates them, they will lose the opportunity to make a fortune, so they all voluntarily leave secret signals to the Devil Realm's entrance control. Only when all the secret signals match can they enter. Chapter 1356. Shun Julie asked a few more questions, and Yelu Jing and reported them to him one by one. Recently, his master had been very concerned about the demon realm, so Yelu Jing and used all his information networks to inquire about the demon realm. This way, he could answer his master's daily questions. Yelu Jing and had secretly complained that his master didn't care about anything for many years. He secretly sighed. He had been the ancestor's disciple for so long, but the chances to see his master's face were pitifully few. He only saw him 3 to 5 times a year.
Now, he didn't complain.
The frequency of him seeing his master was so high that it made people's hair stand on end. He could see him once a day. Before leaving, Yelu Jing and suddenly thought of something. Master, 2 months ago, the wedding items that Master ordered disciple to prepare, burn them. Shun Julie's short 3 words ended the fate of that batch of things.
Yes.
Yelu Jing and agreed. He didn't say anything else and turned to leave. After taking a few steps, he seemed to think of something again. He turned to look at his master, wanting to say something, but hesitated. Shun Julie was impatient. What is it now? Disciple heard a rumor. Little junior sister and Shui Elan recently left the demon realm to play. Pa. A drop of ink fell on the rice paper. He originally wanted to draw a leaf, but it dyed a mountain rock red. Like blood, Shin Julie's brush paused and casually dyed the drop of ink. Where did they go? This, I haven't found out yet. Disciple is sending people to investigate. Shun Julie didn't say anything else and continued to draw with his head bowed. Yelu Jing and saw his brush move like a dragon and finally couldn't help but say, Master, I heard from the demon realm that their good news is near. The demons have already begun to prepare for their wedding. Shun Julie's brush paused for a moment, and a big red mark appeared on the red maple tree that was originally dense with leaves. Yelu Jing and pretended not to see the red maple tree that had been drawn out of shape and finally left. Shun Julie stared at the drawing on the stone table for a moment. The red maple tree in front of him seemed to have turned into a girl's red dress. The wind blew, and the girl's dress danced. The girl's smile was like a flower as she played the pipa. He froze for a moment. This image had suddenly appeared in his mind, and then disappeared. When he wanted to grab it, it had disappeared without a trace. He understood that this should be a scene of him and Ning Xuema together before he lost his memory. It was just an image, and there was no way to connect the two. In the past, when he lost his memory, he would never remember the past. This time, some images flashed through his mind. Although he couldn't connect them together, they were all about Ning Xuema 3,000 years ago. He was injured by Shui Emo, causing the death of his beloved disciple, Long Chuan, and losing half of the immortal world. Not long after he woke up from his grief, he sealed away all his memories of Shui Emo. He didn't expect that the seal would automatically split and become Wu Mo. His injuries were too severe, and he needed to sleep for 10 years to recuperate. Before he fell asleep, in order to prevent himself from repeating the same mistakes, he ordered that he would sleep once every 900 years. After he woke up, he would forget all the oracles from his previous life. He slept like this again and again, and he had long forgotten why he had ordered this kind of oracles in the first place. When Wu Mo died, the memories from 3,000 years ago came back. Only then did he remember everything. That injury also left him with the problem of returning to his youth once every 18 years. He had to cultivate on the 9th peak of Heavenly Book Mountain for 3 days before he could return to normal. Because he had lost all his previous memories, he didn't know where this strange injury came from. Chapter 1357. The reason why Shui Emo was so attentive to him was because she wanted something. He already knew this, but he didn't know what she wanted. At first, he didn't care about her and was too lazy to ask, but later, he was too deep in the mud to ask. He was born as a god. Although he appeared to be indifferent, he was extremely conceited. He felt that since he had fallen in love with this little fox, then with his ability, he could also make Shui Emo fall in love with him and never return to the demon world. Shui Emo's body was special. He understood that his power would decrease if he married her. However, he relied on his high power and didn't care about the danger of temporarily turning into a human for 3 years. He wantonly made love with her, even washing her hands and making soup for her, living the life of an ordinary husband and wife with her. She often said that she didn't have a childhood, so he spent 30% of his power to build a jellyfish castle for her. He never knew that he would spoil a girl so much. He couldn't wait to bring the whole world to her, just to make her smile. He never knew that he could love someone so much that he forgot his identity as a god and did many things that were beneath his godhood. He had eyes and ears everywhere. Some things didn't need to be deliberately asked to know. Before he married Shui Emo, he knew that she was the princess of the demon world, the successor of the demon ancestor. And Shui Elon, who was injured by his palm, was her follower. The two were inseparable in the demon world. Shui Elon's red robe left a deep impression on him. Therefore, after he learned about the relationship between Shui Emo and Shui Elon, he subconsciously hated the color red. Even if he got married, he didn't want to wear a wedding robe. He thought that he would hold her hand for the rest of his life. Who would have thought that she would personally cut open his heart for another man? The more he loved her at that time, the more he was hurt after she betrayed him. He was a god. The woman who married him 3,000 years ago didn't need to go through any tribulation because even if there was one, he could easily block it. 3,000 years later, this rule was made after he was injured by Shui Emo. He was afraid that he would fall in love with a witch in the future, so he made this rule. Witches couldn't go through the real tribulation. He had arranged everything very well, and the past 3,000 years had been peaceful and stable. But he didn't expect that 3,000 years later, she would turn into Ning Xuema and come to his side, and he fell in love with her once again after going around in circles. The three of them bumped into each other again. This was really a sin. His fingers unconsciously tightened around the brush, and his eyelashes drooped. Suddenly, with a crack, the brush snapped and fell to the ground. The painting on the table also spontaneously combusted, turning into ashes in the blink of an eye. When the wind blew, not a single trace was left behind. These days, Shui Elon brought Ning Xuema to many beautiful places in different spacetimes. For example, the flower immortal country's 10,000 li sea of flowers. The entire world was a sea of flowers. Countless beautiful flowers bloomed in a vigorous manner. Beautiful and exquisite fairies shuttled through the flowers. Countless streams of light sprinkled down, causing the flowers to glow even in the dark night. For example, the crystal sea of the Water Dream Nation was like a piece of crystal-clear jade, so clear that one could see the bottom. Ning Xuema and Shui Elon held hands and hovered above the sea. They could clearly see the beautiful and enchanting mermaids in the depths of the sea. She also went to many places and saw beautiful scenery that she had never seen before. Shui Elon could clearly feel that Ning Xuema's mood was gradually improving. Her eyes were no longer dark and gloomy, and they began to show true brilliance. Chapter 1358. Her attitude towards him was no longer so repulsive. At first, she would freeze when he held her hand, but now, she no longer rejected his embrace. Shui Elon finally understood that if he treated Ning Xuema forcefully, she would only feel disgusted and run away. He had to slowly influence her and make her willing to be with him. Somewhere, the sun slowly sank below the surface of the sea. The setting sun melted the gold, and the evening clouds merged together. Large clouds of fire burned continuously in the sky, reflecting the entire sea with a golden-red color. Xue Yilan and Ning Xuema were still dressed in red, and they danced vigorously in the sea breeze. Ning Xuema looked at the distant sea in a daze. Xue Yilan looked at her walking beside him, and his heart was filled with an indescribable sense of satisfaction. He tilted his head and asked, "Momo, what are you thinking about?" Ning Xuema withdrew her gaze and said indifferently, "Nothing." The two of them walked on the beach for a long time until the golden crows sank into the sea. The bright moon slowly rose from where the water met the sky, and the stars in the sky were like a plate of loose sand, slowly flowing in the sky. Xue Yilan looked at Ning Xuema, and his lips curved into a smile. He said meaningfully, "Momo, isn't it wonderful to have someone accompany you and play with you?" Ning Xuema glanced at him, revealing a smile that was not a smile. "Lan Shan, what do you want to say?" Xue Yilan's heart suddenly beat faster. He tried hard to maintain the expression on his face and tried to sound as calm as possible. "Momo, I'll accompany you for a long time in the future. What do you think?" After saying this, he stared at Ning Xuema like a child waiting for the results of an exam. Ning Xuema looked at the distant sea and the wisps of sea fog. She was silent for a long time. As time passed, Xue Yilan's heart sank. Just as his heart was about to sink to the bottom of the valley, Ning Xuema turned her head with a faint smile on her lips. "You can try." Xue Yilan's heart, which had fallen to rock bottom, instantly rose to heaven. He felt like he was in a dream. His eyes were astonishingly bright. He looked at Ning Xuema for a long time without saying anything. Suddenly, he somersaulted in the air and smiled like a flower. "Okay, let's give it a try." Ning Xuema looked at his bright eyes, and her heart suddenly sank. Xue Yilan's feelings for her were too heavy for her to bear. When Ning Xuema saw the familiar scenery on the street, her body stiffened slightly. Why did Xue Yilan bring her to the immortal nation? Looking at the exquisite carvings and paintings everywhere, countless memories uncontrollably rushed into her mind. Ning Xuema closed her eyes. When Xue Yilan's eyes swept over her, she returned to her indifferent appearance. Xue Yilan didn't want to come here, but he always wanted to give Ning Xuema a gift. Shen Juli had once given her a pair of email piercers, but she had already thrown them back. Now Ning Xuema didn't even have a good weapon. If he gave her a weapon made of moonlight iron, she would definitely be very happy, right? But he didn't plan on telling Ning Xuema about this. He wanted to give her a pleasant surprise. The two of them first went to the tea house to drink a pot of fragrant tea. Then they went to the Ni Chong Pavilion to buy a lot of clothes. Xue Yilan was finally satisfied as he left with Ning Xuema. As long as Ning Xuema's eyes stopped on something, he would spend a lot of money to buy it. Now he added a pile of clothes. Chapter 1359. Xue Yilan had never thought that other than weapons, poisons, and charms would appear in his storage space. But now, looking at these small things, he was even happier than if he had obtained a peerless weapon. This was because he had already obtained a rare treasure. Whatever else was left was not worth mentioning. He only wanted to pamper Momo. The two slowly walked out of the city. There were fewer and fewer people, and the scenery became more and more beautiful. Xue Yilan brought Ning Xuema around the outskirts of the city for a long time, as if he was looking for something. After a while, he finally stopped at a place. This was a relatively spacious area, facing the sun. Behind it was a lush green mountain, facing the rippling water. There were a few willow trees planted by the water, and the willow leaves gently danced on the water. On the soft green grass, cute little animals would often run by. Xue Yilan raised his hand, and the little animals were forcefully thrown back into the forest. A small two-story building rose from the ground. It was exquisite and beautiful. There was a fence around the building, blocking the curious little animals outside. Xue Yilan held Ning Xuema's hand and walked into the building. He smiled faintly and said, "The distant mountain is beautiful, and the nearby water is smoky. Momo, let's live here in seclusion for a while, okay?" Ning Xuema looked at the fresh and unique scenery around her and nodded. The next morning, Shui Ilan disappeared. When Ning Xuema woke up, she saw a steaming hot meal and a note on the table. The note said, "Momo, I'll be back in the evening. Don't worry." Ning Xuema stared blankly at the note for a while. Suddenly, the corner of her lips curled up slightly. She sat down and began to eat. This should be the food that Shui Ilan cooked. It was very delicious. Once some things became a habit, she would get used to it. She should be able to get used to it quickly. After Ning Xuema finished eating, she began to meditate and cultivate. She cultivated for an entire day. Shui Ilan had been slaughtering dragons on Mount Yuehua for an entire day, but he hadn't even found a single piece of moonlight iron. He was already restless, and now he was even more upset. He wondered if Momo had stayed at home obediently. He didn't set up any barriers around the hut, nor did he restrict Ning Xuema's movements. He allowed her to come and go as she pleased. This was actually a bold test of his. He wanted to see if Momo was truly with him. That night at the seaside, Momo's response to his bold confession was a pleasant surprise. It made him feel that it was unreal. He was afraid that she was just stalling for time. Once he let his guard down, she would leave and never come back. Therefore, after Ning Xuema agreed to try it with him, he became even more frightened. He was on tenterhooks every night. The time he spent with Ning Xuema was too beautiful and dreamy, which made him feel unreal. He was afraid that when he woke up, he would wake up from his dream and become a lonely person again. This sweet fear had been tormenting him for a long time. It made his heart more and more sensitive when it came to flirting. He was worthy of being called a veteran in the field of flowers. However, when it came to seriously pursuing a person, he really had no experience. This made him even more terrified. Even if he presented the best things to Ning Xuema, he still felt that they were not enough. It wasn't until he accidentally saw a love story in the human world. It was written that if you love someone, you have to believe in that person. He felt that he seemed to have understood something. In order to understand love more thoroughly and understand how to pursue a person better, Shui Ilan had bought countless books and read them every night by burning oil in the lamp. Chapter 1360. This situation persisted until Ning Xuema inadvertently saw it and stopped. Because he still couldn't forget Ning Xuema's surprised and funny expression at that time. For the first time in his life, he felt embarrassed. So he burned the small book with a wooden face. But he had already memorized the contents of the book. If he loved her, he had to believe in her. Shui Ilan decided that he would try to believe in Ning Xuema, believe that she was sincerely with him. So he gave her enough freedom and respect. Her injuries had already healed. In a day, if she wanted to leave, she had enough opportunities to run away. She also had enough time to run to a place where he could never find her again. Would she have already taken the opportunity to leave him and run far away? Shui Ilan was distracted, and his robe was almost burned by the moonlight pterosaur's flame. His eyes darkened, and he raised his hand to deal with the moonlight pterosaur. There was still no moonlight iron. Thinking that Ning Xuema might have left him and gone to a place he didn't know, Shui Ilan's mood became even more irritable. Looking at the sky, the moon was already hanging in the sky. Unable to bear it anymore, his figure flashed and turned into a red light flying towards the small house. What if Mo really left? This thought lingered in his heart, making his heart slightly tighten. As he got closer and closer to the small house, his heart became more and more tense, and his heart beat like a drum. Then he would dig 3 feet into the ground to find Ning Xuema again and lock her in the barrier, not letting her have the chance to leave him again. Shui Ilan's eyes flashed with a red light, but as if he suddenly thought of something, his eyes darkened. He had once locked Ning Xuema up for 10 years, and in exchange, she only hated him and fled. So he couldn't lock her up. He had to slowly reform her. Even if she left this time, he could find her and accompany her everywhere. It didn't matter if she left early. He could catch up with her and join her. Although he tried his best to comfort himself, His heart still sank when he saw the dark building without a single light. Did Momo really leave? Did she really abandon him and leave? His heart was about to sink into icy water. Lifting his feet, he stiffly approached the small building. Not in the courtyard, not in the hall, not in the training room, not in his own room. Shui Ilan searched through all the rooms except for Ning Xuema's bedroom on the second floor. He slowly walked up to the second floor. His footsteps were so light that there was no sound. He gently pulled open the door to Ning Xuema's bedroom, and what greeted him was darkness. The bedding was neatly placed at the head of the bed, and there was no trace of heat. Obviously, Ning Xuema had been gone for a long time. She must have left without hesitation after he left. No matter how well he treated her, as soon as he left for a short while, she would leave him without any reluctance, making him unable to find her again. Momo, how can you be so cruel? Shui Ilan's heart ached terribly. He looked at the empty bed, and sorrow flooded him like a tide. Where should he go to find her? In a day's time, she might have already gone to another time and space. In this vast sea of people, where should he go to find her? After he found her, would she abandon him again? Shui Ilan felt that all his strength had been sucked away. His body swayed, and under the moonlight, his face became even paler, almost without any blood. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.